He reincarnates into a game world as a side character destined to die at the hands of future villains. But those villains are just broken children fated to become the deadly sins. Knowing the story, he decides to change their future before they turn into monsters. He raises them, protects them, and secretly gathers legendary artifacts for himself. The funniest part, his mana is actually trash, but thanks to his strange divine magic, the entire kingdom mistakes him for an unstoppable mastermind. Can a weak noble survive while raising the most dangerous children in the world? The kingdom of the East will fall at the hands of the 5 great sins in 10 years. To prevent this, the protagonist, Alon, became their patron. He never thought things would turn out like this. He was an office slave, working 78 hours a week, and suddenly he found himself in the body of a nobleman from another world. Is this good? Well, in a way it is. In this world, he is illiterate and lacks any special powers. He can't even read a book. Shouldn't he have automatically learned the local language? He was fed luxurious and delicious meals and bathed by lovely maids. While bathing, a maid warned him that the young masters would return tomorrow, so he should go to bed early today. He didn't understand who she was talking about, and she explained, slightly awkwardly, that she was talking about the young masters Leo and Tonio. Why is he asking as if he doesn't know his own family? He really didn't know them, but their names seemed so ominously familiar for some reason. And then he understood everything. He grabbed his head in horror and plunged into the water, wondering if he was in Psychedelia. Psychedelia was a famous RPG he played in his free time. The problem was that no matter which path he chose, as soon as the 5 great sins appeared, anger, greed, sloth, pride, obsession, the kingdom, the nobility, the cities, essentially everything would collapse. And among them is House Palladio. The eldest son, Leo Palateo, is the king of vice. The second son, Tonio Palateo, is a baron. They are a family of noble scum from a side quest that begins even before the main story. And Alan knew this place very well, since he had already completed a quest to investigate the dark deeds of House Palateo. This family is the first to be destroyed by the 5 great sins, and he turned out to be the third son, Alan Palateo. As soon as night fell, he lay down on his bed and began to pray for a return home, even asking for his 78-hour work week back. So what if he lives in luxury? He will die in 10 years. Why did he end up in the body of a fictional character without a single ability? Others are always lucky. And then an idea occurred to him. He has knowledge of what will happen in 10 years, and this makes him practically a prophet. So why doesn't he just prevent the fall of this world? And so, he decided to take on the 5 great sins in the name of a quiet, noble life. It will be easy as pie while they are still children, no abilities. 2 months passed. All this time he was looking for them. A knight named Evan came to him and reported to him that they saved orphans from an Eastern orphanage, which was actually a center for human experiments. And all this in the name of saving a girl named Utaya. MC nodded in satisfaction and said that he had a keen eye. He truly was a capable man. Evan looked away uncertainly and asked if that was a compliment. It just wasn't obvious from his face. Alon confirmed it and said with a forced smile that he was counting on him. The knight was very uncomfortable with his behavior, and MC, practicing his smile in the mirror, thought that he used to express his emotions openly. He felt as if the soul's rebirth had only affected his face, but Evan was still pleased with his praise and began to smile shyly. Evan is a rare character in Psychedelia. He remains honest and loyal despite all the betrayals. He hired him as soon as he met him. The knight asked thoughtfully. He said it was for the sake of saving a girl named Utaya, right? Now he understands why he needs it. Even for him, an experienced mercenary, she was an unusual child. When he saw her in the dungeon, he felt that she was so strong that he simply could not understand why she did not resist. Why didn't he bring her here? There is no point in keeping her there. Alan agreed with him. It may seem that he is simply neglecting her, but leaving her there is part of his plan. Utaya Bledia is an inhuman who will make a contract with an otherworldly creature for its power and become Wrath, one of the 5 great sins, to destroy hundreds of thousands of people. But she will not become Wrath if she grows up in a peaceful environment. He finally disarmed one mind, but he will have to come up with something to explain to Evan. He cleared his throat and said that it was not time yet. Evan was surprised and thought about his words, and he ordered him to make sure that no one talks about this and to provide them with sufficient funding. Then he gave him a letter and asked him to give it to Utaya, and he asked if there was something important in it. He replied that he just wanted to see how she was doing. He decided that he should at least somehow cheer her up since she had been through so much. Evan was dubious about this, but he didn't ask unnecessary questions and promised him to make sure she got it. After that, he mounted his horse and went to fulfill the errand, and MC, watching him from the window of his office, thought that he was not sure that this would really calm her down. At least, it was worth a try. The real purpose of the letter is to insert the phrases that the Archbishop said. This prayer will help grant peace to the inhuman, sin of wrath, be calm, anguish of the shadow, clarity of the light, one worth, one binding, and other phrases like that. During the development of the Sin of Wrath storyline, Utaya will awaken and kill him, saying that he was too late. In the game, all attempts to calm her fail, and the battle begins. But now, perhaps it is not yet so late. He stretched and wondered if, since he had dealt with one goal, he should move on to the next. Of course, it was foolish to hope to befriend a monster because of some quote, but it might work, since they worship some deity from another world. It is difficult for him to understand how these sins think, They are simply like fanatics. After some time, Evan handed Utaya the letter, and while she read it, he thought nervously that the mana he felt from her was simply incredible. She is a strange child, as if she has no emotions at all. She finished reading and clarified. He said that Lord Alon sent this, didn't he? So why didn't he take her? She released her terrifying aura, the feeling of which made him sweat. He was so nervous. The manifestation of mana in such a form is only possible in the realm of the Overlord. He remembered what Alon had said and nervously exclaimed that he had said it was not time yet. She immediately calmed down and, looking at the lines in the letter, lastly, bear this in mind. Anguish of the shadow, clarity of the light. One worth, one binding. She pressed the sheet of paper to her chest and said with a smile that this was a promise that only he knew about. Now she knew everything. Evan reached for the sword in fear, and she said that she understood what he meant. This is the sin of wrath, the daughter of monsters, and the bloody queen Utaya. Meanwhile, MC tried to sleep and thought that he managed to prolong his luxurious life a little longer. Even the bright moon was on his side today. He would also try his best with the next child. Time passed. MC was doing his usual business. This time he was in the library. Several books fell on his head, and he cursed, quietly wondering if it really wasn't here after all. His head was already splitting from searching for clues about the third boss. Evan ran up to him and told him that they had saved the second child he had mentioned. He asked, hadn't he been extremely polite to him? He confirmed this and wanted to tell him what had happened after they had rescued him from the slave market, but suddenly Tonio burst into the library, kicking down the door. He immediately began to mock his brother, asking, since when had an ignoramus like him picked up books? He heard that he was learning to read and write. He ignored him and patted him on the head, ordering him to answer. He thought that he was always pestering him, and how had the old Alon tolerated him? He would have been glad to answer, but it was better not to. He immediately bowed his head to him and said that he saw that he needed the library now, so he would leave right now. Tonio put his foot on his head and pinned him to the floor, telling him to know his place, and suddenly a knife flew past his face and pierced the screen next to him. It was Leo, he exclaimed in displeasure. What's all the noise here? Tonio was about to answer him, but he said that he didn't want to quarrel so early in the morning, so he should get out of here. Tonio walked up to him and said with a smirk that he told him to leave his manners at the library threshold, and he in response pressed the dagger to his neck and said that he smelled of powder, so he should leave while he was still in one piece. MC, meanwhile, quietly crawled away. The Palladio house didn't last long in the game, but they are much stronger than he thought. Basically, his vile brothers are squabbling for the place of the head of the family, a major figure in the criminal underworld, the king of vice, and the head of a huge cartel, a baron. For his own sake, he shouldn't mess with these two. So, while they were busy with each other, he crawled to the exit and Evan fixed his hair, and he thought that he was going to live a long and happy life as an inconspicuous weakling. Returning to his room, he immediately collapsed onto the sofa with a heavy sigh, and Evan continued where they had left off. He said that the second child also seemed unusual, and Alon turned to him warily. He fell silent, and wondered how he could have found out about the illegal slave market and secret biological experiments in another region. He seems to be having a hard time keeping his composure. He noticed that he was acting strange, so he sent the child to an orphanage. MC confirmed this with a bored expression and wondered if the child seemed unusual to him. It's not that simple. This child is a walking disaster. In a united kingdom of several nations, Kalian is the central figure. The one they rescued from the slave market turned out to be the second boss of psychedelia, Deos Macalian. After being sold into slavery and abused, Deos became the embodiment of one of the 5 great sins, the sin of sloth, and then destroyed kingdoms in the most horrific ways imaginable. It was the brutality of this part of the story that shocked many players. Contrary to his nickname, the sin of sloth was considered a very hardworking person, which is why he told Evan to treat Deus with the utmost politeness. He said that the reason he sent the child to the orphanage was simple. It was not the time yet. Evan noted that he thought so. So the letter he sent to Utaya was about a second child? Alon remembered the contents of the letter. He told her how his brother had teased him and only mentioned that child at the end, and replied that he had not only told her about it but also chatted with her for a while. He told her to take care of a sick child he had sent to her, and Utaya did so. While the other children ran and played among themselves, he hid in the shadows. She approached him and told him that he was broken. She noticed his scars and asked if they were just marks. It was a black goat, wasn't it? And yet the great moon had chosen him. She congratulated him on this. She spread her arms out to the sides and solemnly told him to feel the power he had been given and to unleash his potential. She extended her hand to him and said that if he faithfully followed her orders, he would exact his revenge. Her words had an effect on the boy. A multitude of threads sprouted from his back, spreading around the area. She took out Alan's letter with a satisfied expression and thought it was time to send him her first reply with a short greeting. Sometime later, MC was sitting in the library, looking for notes on the third boss, when suddenly his loyal knight burst into the room, saying that they were in big trouble. The second young master was dead. This news greatly surprised Alon, and most likely it was the work of those children. The day of the funeral arrived, everyone dressed in black, and came to see Tonio off. The head of the family even brought his mistresses to the funeral, and the whole time they whined about being bored. Listening to their whining, MC thought that he knew this family was not well, but this was just a disaster. Be that as it may, he never thought that Tonio would die from an accidental fall. He doesn't remember such an episode at all. According to the game's plot, he was supposed to die at Leo's hand for the title of heir. He was glad that he finally killed him after so many years, and now his face showed how happy he was with such luck. He at least tried to hide his emotions. The culprit was probably either Leo or his people. He glanced at Tonio one last time and thought that, no matter what, he only needed to deal with the 5 great sins. A year later, when the problem with the heir was solved and Leo took over the cartel, the county became calmer. Meanwhile, he and Utia established a correspondence. If he kept in touch with her, it would be useful in the future. In her next letter, she wrote that Yuna was very good at hide and seek, Hiden was good at war games, and Deos was quite quiet and calm, loved toys. The thought flashed through his mind that they were nice kids, and at the end of the letter, as usual, he saw the list of sponsors of the month. He was surprised to notice that the list had grown again. It was strange that such a small orphanage was getting more and more sponsors. Evan said it was still good. He had news about what he was looking for. The Information Guild reported that they had found a clue. He handed him the documents, and he said it was such a relief, and thought that it must be that ancient book about the third boss. He would finally find this guy too. Everything was going very well. Such a quiet evening today. But if only it were so. That same evening, Leo's men went to the powder distribution point on business, and when they left the building, one of them said that Palateo's eldest son was quite generous, never stingy with rewards. His friend agreed with him. Their organization now had several hundred people. And then they saw something terrible. All their people waiting outside were dead, and the only survivors, right before their eyes, turned their blades on themselves with terrified screams, as if they were doing it against their will. And that guy's partner suffered the same fate. He pulled out a blade and pointed the tip at his own neck, and then they all stabbed at the same time. Deos, hiding in an alley, finished off the last one with his threads, and Utia approached him, saying that she enjoyed today's puppet show. It looks like they have more to tell. Deos asked, "Does this make sense?" She asked in response, "Does he really feel sorry for them?" He told her that it is not so. They just use people to make illegal substances. He does not know if this has anything to do with his revenge. She waved her hands and said with a smile that, of course, it is all connected. This is the foundation they will build for his return. Can they really allow this place to remain so wretched? He told her that he understood everything, after which she used magic and transported them to the sky above the city, saying that everything will be as he wishes. And then they crashed into the square and left, vowing that they were the blue moon, would become his sword, and left behind a moon sign carved into the square. Time passed, and Alon and Utia had been corresponding for 2 years now. Evan returned from another errand, barely dragging his feet from fatigue, and when he found him in the yard, he immediately collapsed and told him that they had also successfully sent the 5th one to the orphanage. MC was very happy with this news. In these 2 years, he had saved the remaining 3 sins. As a reward, he gave Evan cake and other sweets. He had trouble finding the 3rd one, but using his knowledge from the game, he was able to get Evan to figure it out. After the cakes, Evan gained strength, and Alon told him that he had done a great job. Now he could rest. He asked, "Isn't this all about the orphanage?" He confirmed it, and Evan sighed with relief, then lay down on the grass and asked, "Isn't he happy?" He sat down next to him and told him that he was happy, and he noticed that his face said otherwise. MC pointed to his mouth and said that he was smiling. The corners of his lips lifted slightly, and Evan said that he would consider himself happy. After that, Alon stretched and lay down on the grass, thinking that he didn't expect everything to go so smoothly. The bosses from the game became the 5 sins because of their terrible past. Even knowing their lives before becoming sins, the chances of saving everyone in time were simply negligible, and he was afraid that he would save them when they were already broken. He asked Evan how things were at the orphanage, and he, handing him the letter, answered that, as usual, everything was fine. Before, they looked like soulless dolls, but now they had become much more alive. MC said that in this case, they would not need a separate caregiver, and then opened the letter. He didn't think Utia could do so well. Is it because of her upbringing, or is she so attached to the orphanage because of her past? She definitely won't like it if he interferes. He noted with puzzlement that Utia was a very good girl, and Evan crawled closer to him and peeked at the letter, asking if there was something important in it. Utia wrote that everything was fine, some of them were starting to behave better, and he didn't need to worry about them at all. She also asked him not to worry too much about the other children. He imagined them having a fun time and said that he was glad that they seemed to be doing perfectly well. Looking at how well they were growing, he realized that the environment is truly the most important thing. Evan asked when he was going to meet the children. He always says that the time will come. He looked away, not knowing what to say to that. In fact, he was not going to meet them, ever. Maybe he should get closer to them, but in the game they had such personalities that he didn't really want to communicate with them. Perhaps it was because of how brutal the process of turning them into sins was. He wasn't so scared now that he'd saved them before, but he was still scared. He told Evan that he might meet them in 5 years, and thought that, whatever the case, he needed skills to protect himself in this world. Luckily, magic required talent, and this body was perfect. He continued training, and Evan asked if he'd heard of the Blue Moon. Without looking up from his magic, he told him that he'd never heard of it, and he told him that it was an organization that had recently become famous for hunting down criminal gangs. He remarked that fighting evil was quite commendable, and thought that he hadn't heard of them, so he was sure they would disappear soon. Evan suddenly ran his finger near his neck and stuck out his tongue, ominously saying that he had heard that they even kill nobles. He thought he knew about them. Immediately after this, Alan asked him to sleep next to his room from that day on. Night fell, and Utaya gathered everyone in the room to hear the Blue Moon report for this week. What's in the north? The sin of pride, Solen said that she brought the heads of all the slavers. She began jumping around the room joyfully, telling them that they didn't even realize who she was. She said she would let them live if they guessed the color of her eyes, but they couldn't. The sin of greed, Renee calmly reported that the bodies were burned. The sin of obsession, Raydan said that the South was also finished. He dealt with the illegal human testing facilities and turned the idiots from Avalon into mincemeat. Utaya smiled contentedly and said that everything would be done according to his will. They exist for the sake of the Great Moon. Deos said that, however, they seemed to have a problem. She immediately turned a displeased look on him and asked, what could be the problem if everything goes according to his will? He asked, isn't the head of Avalon the eldest son of the Count in whose family he lives? When he was dealing with the South, he found a dangerous order. It seems the Count's eldest son was targeting his majesty. He handed her a note, and the contents of it greatly angered her, making everyone uneasy. It said, after the Count's death, the time will come for Alan's poisoning, and she angrily squeezed the note in her hand, saying that she understood everything. 2 years later, Alan's father, Count Palladio, died. The official cause of death was listed as heart failure, but it was obviously an overdose. Leo and his knights began whispering about the Blue Moon's tricks. They attacked last night and beat everyone. After listening to the conversations, MC found out that the Blue Moon has become more feared. So, the Count's death, which no one mourned, passed in complete silence. And when Alan left, Leo looked at him suspiciously. Returning to his room, MC immediately began packing his suitcases, and Evan asked what he intended to do now. At this rate, the eldest son would become Count, and why did he need so many bags? Alan ordered him to pack his things. They were running away. Evan was indignant and asked if he was really going to leave. He began packing, and MC answered that they weren't exactly leaving, but going down to Rodmill. It was a small town south of Palladio, and that's where they went to avoid Leo's attack for the heir's place. When they left, he was unhappy because he hadn't yet had time to implement his plan. They had a quiet and peaceful life in that town, and so, 3 days later, they returned to Palladio, this time for Leo's funeral. Standing in front of the coffin, Alan clutched his head and sighed heavily. He can't believe he's back here. Did he die outside of the plot too? Why so quickly? So the blow was to the heart, but who could have killed him? He turned to the knight to find out the cause of death, and he immediately squealed in fear and begged him for forgiveness for looking at him. His worried comrade waved his hand, calling him over, and MC asked in confusion what was wrong with him. The other servants started whispering. Evan approached him, and he asked if he had found out anything. He confirmed it, and quietly asked if he was the one who made Avalon disappear overnight. Alan was completely confused by this news. He glanced at the servants, who were avoiding his gaze as best they could, and wondered what had happened. On the day they left for Rodmill, Evan asked if it wouldn't be better to go to the city. MC, with a stone face, remained silent. Rodmill was the endpoint of his plan. He needs to save the 5 great sins from their terrible fate and prevent the world from collapsing. Rodmill has nothing to do with the original plot, and the Palladio mansion is there too. It's the perfect place for a nobleman to live. You don't have to do anything there. He cryptically answered the knight that everything happens for a reason, and he said that he won't deceive him anymore. He always says that. He noticed that he had exposed him pretty quickly, and told him that he had decided so. They left the estate grounds, and Leo, watching the carriage, thought, should he kill him? It doesn't matter whether he's alive or dead. He was going to poison him anyway after his father's death. He said he was going to leave for the border, so now he had no reason to kill him. Is it because things with Avalon are going badly? He's just getting in his way. He called out to his subordinate, Ullman, and ordered him to follow the carriage, and he asked if he wanted him to kill him. Leo turned to him in surprise and thought that Ullman had never contradicted him, no matter what he ordered. So why was he suddenly asking questions? He sighed heavily and shook his head, reminding him that his job was to do as he said. Immediately after, a sharp sword pierced his chest, and he, with a painful sigh, asked how he dared betray him. Ullman said that he enjoyed playing the confrontation. It was fun. The Ullman working for Leo was actually Hedun, a member of the Blue Moon. He said that the Great Moon taught them the most important principles. The Blue Moon is that man's creation, and it must act according to his will. But if someone tries to harm the moon, they are free to act as they please. He drew his sword and struck again, after which he said that he was waiting for him to reveal all his cards. To think that it took him 2 years to decide on this. With his last breath, Leo said that his subordinates would never forgive him, and he said that now Avalon would disappear from this continent forever. What a pity. The great moon gave him a chance. After that he left, leaving him to die. Morning came. Alan woke up in a bed in the estate in Rodmill, and was already very happy. This is a real paradise. He wakes up when he wants, eats what he wants. He can live the life of a real nobleman. When he was having fried toast for breakfast, Evan brought him a letter, and when he read it, he dropped a piece of toast from his mouth in shock. It was a notice of Leo Palatio's death, and a request to return to the county. And so his heavenly life ended after 4 days, and he returned to the Palatio estate. He glanced at the servants, who trembled at just one glance, and wondered what was wrong with their faces. Evan asked, since when did they become afraid of him? MC was in shock. Now he had to deal with a new chain of events. This was just insane. They moved away from the main crowd, and Alon, with tears in his eyes, asked Evan to explain why he suddenly became a villain. He awkwardly rubbed his neck and told him that he was the only one who benefited from this situation. After they left the estate, Leo was killed, and he had the perfect alibi to become the Earl's heir. Avalon is no more, so with Leo's death, nothing will bother him anymore. This can only mean one thing. He smiled and declared that he was the Eminence Grease who organized Leo's murder. He asked discontentedly, and was he having fun? After that, he sighed heavily and wondered, where should he start? No organization is capable of eliminating a key figure in the criminal underworld overnight. He looked up at the night and asked, there is an organization that hunts other groups? He clarified, is he talking about the Blue Moon? He confirmed this and assumed that they were the culprits of Leo's death. But Evan said that the Information Guild told him that the Blue Moon had nothing to do with it. The Blue Moon leaves a trace at the scene of the murder. They say that the Avalon members were killed with a sword, so the road to hell is open. MC even shuddered and said that this is why he is considered the Grey Eminence who killed the Swordmaster. The Blue Moon, it turns out, was not involved. Weaklings who will disappear before the start of the main storyline cannot be behind this. Then who was it? Recently, Utaya called a meeting about the remaining traces. Renee told her that there was nothing left, and Solen said the same. There were only bodies. Deos returned and informed her that 486 Avalon soldiers remained, and Radon, following him into the room, told the boss that as she ordered he cut them all down. She smiled contentedly and said that everything was just perfect. And just like that, Avalon, a massive organization dominating the kingdom of Asteria, was reduced to dust in just 5 days. Radon said he didn't think the operation had been successful. He showed Utia the folder and said he'd found it on nobles affiliated with Avalon. The Duchy of Altia had close ties to them. She looked over the documents and glared at him, saying he knew perfectly well what she would say to that. The other Sins looked at her confidently, understanding her meaning, and Radon smiled and said he'd handle it quietly. She took a deep breath, calming herself, and asked with a smile, has anything leaked to the Information Guild? Renee replied that this matter was being handled separately from the Blue Moon, and Deus added that all guilds were the same. They called the assassin a hellish swordsman. Renee asked if she should continue monitoring their movements. Utaya confirmed this. This matter mustn't reach his ears. She said this many times already. They all know. Deus noted that the man's family attacked first, and she said that it wasn't an order. They are swordsmen, and they shouldn't act on their own free will. The Blue Moon should only work on orders. They must remember this, that man knows everything. They must never disappoint him. Deus frowned. He didn't understand this. Why would someone with such extraordinary abilities as Utaya feel anxious simply out of fear of being discovered? He told her he understood everything, all for the Great Moon. Time passed. Alon dropped a pile of documents on the table in tears, not wanting to deal with this anymore. After the funeral, endless work dragged on for a whole month. He was terribly busy. He just wants to laze around and eat. Isn't that what nobles are for? He made enemies, but Leo was supposed to die only in 6 years. Because the order of deaths changed the course of the game, all the work fell on him as the heir. Several more servants entered the office with piles of documents in their hands, and he sighed resignedly. Why does everyone work like this? When the Count was alive, they were constantly shirking their work. Seeing his gaze, the servants became nervous, and thinking he was angry, they decided to work harder so he wouldn't kill them. Meanwhile, he thought, are the servants really that worked up over rumors that he's a secret assassin? They don't need to come so often. He's a former slave who just wants to do his job in peace. I wish they could handle it themselves, without his interference. Time passed, and after finishing his business, MC returned to his quarters. While he was training, Evan was frying potatoes in the fireplace and watching him, saying that it was simply amazing. He looked at the clots of magic flying all over the room and said that it was amazing that he had reached the 2nd level in just 2 years of self-study. He had tremendous talent. When did he manage to learn all this? It usually takes about 4 years to reach the 2nd level. Besides, magic often requires innate talent. Alon said that he really had talent and thought that he trained hard for self-defense because he felt in danger. He needed to be able to precisely control his mana. But what good would it do if he did everything half-heartedly? He had already tried every kind of magic in this world. At first, it was exciting. He thought that if the plan worked, he would get rid of all the threats and then gradually learn more. But now, in a desperate attempt to save himself, he realized that his mana reserves were simply negligible. The magic evaporated, and he sighed sadly. Innate mana reserves are comparable to the weight class of athletes, and his mana reserves are very, very tiny, and no amount of training can fix it. If nothing helps him, there is one way. He sat down next to Evan and showed him the letter, saying that his invitation to the ball had finally arrived. Hearing this word, he became slightly interested. Soon the very day arrived. MC arrived at the ball, accompanied by his faithful knight. While Evan blushingly looked at the table with desserts, he sighed heavily and thought that he was so tired. This is an ordinary aristocratic ball in the southern kingdom of Astilia, a meeting for the nobility. He'll soon be a count. Maybe he should take the chance and make some connections. He straightened his clothes with a serious expression, and Evan approached him with a full plate of sweets. Connections with the nobility are important for a peaceful future, but everyone is simply wary of him. As soon as he tried to talk to someone, the nobleman immediately ran away in fear. After watching Alan's attempts to establish connections, Evan burst out laughing and told him not to be too upset. He frowned and thought that he wasn't upset. That was expected. He said goodbye to the knight and went in search of an interlocutor with a confident air, knowing that he knew they would look down on him because of his status. Unlike the time of his respected great-grandfather, the current Palladio family is full of troublemakers from the east. But he didn't come here without a reason. He will use the charm skill he had secretly honed. He approached someone's daughter and, taking a glass of wine from the table, told her that this drink was unique. He was especially struck by the aroma. It was inimitable. Then he looked at her with a smile and said that he would like to have a couple of bottles of such wine, she thought. A soft smile is an important social tool, but coupled with his deadly gaze, it only engendered fear. The poor lady shuddered at his expression. She broke into a run and exclaimed that she would immediately tell her father to prepare everything. He extended his hand after her, trying to stop her. This was not the reaction he expected. The nobles behind him began to whisper. Did he just force her to serve him a rare local wine? He was even worse than his late brothers. Evan patted him on the shoulder and laughed, and he thought that perhaps she was just very shy. Time passed. MC still had no chance to talk properly to anyone, and the number of his gifts only increased. He was given a luxurious horse from Palatine, citrus tea from Pinia, metalwork from Villand, and a signature wine of Malentino. Alan was very annoyed because he simply wanted to study the wine. The Palladio family turned out to be much more notorious than he thought, and because of the rumor that he got rid of his monstrous brothers, he became someone everyone shunned. He glanced at the nobles gathered in a group and thought that his social life was ruined. He felt like he had become even more isolated from society. He became very upset and went alone to get some air, but he didn't notice that the lady had been watching him with interest all this time. Stepping out onto the balcony, MC sighed heavily and wondered, why did everything turn out like this? He was distracted from his thoughts by a girl's voice coming from behind the door. She politely asked if she could talk to him, and he wondered if someone was there, but who could it be? The door slowly opened and he saw a little girl standing in front of him. It was Loria, the third daughter of Duke Altia. His mood immediately sank, and he greeted her weakly, thinking that this explained a lot. The Altia family is one of the three main shadow figures of psychedelia. They are known as the Northern Troublemakers, and she is definitely not an ordinary girl. But why doesn't he remember her in the game? He doesn't think she even appeared in the game. She stated that she would be frank, let him lend her his power. His face immediately darkened and she said that the thing is, she will soon be killed. She began to tell him why she thought so, and he thought that until now, she had been protected, like the daughter of her father's mistress. But Duke Altia's condition worsened, and now her sisters want to get rid of her. It's not surprising that he doesn't remember her. She must have already been dead by that point in the game. Loria excitedly said that with his power he could help her, but he didn't even let her finish and firmly refused. She became nervous and said that she wasn't asking for help without reason. If he saved her, she would give him half of the Altia family fortune. He went to the door, not wanting to continue this conversation, and thought that he felt sorry for her. But he could barely take care of himself now. It was better not to give her false hope. Even if he wanted to help her, he wasn't as powerful as the rumors said. Before leaving, he glanced at her doubtfully. She stood with a dejected expression and stared into space. He sighed heavily, turned to her, and said as a parting word that something good would happen, and that he hoped she would find a reliable ally. He returned to the banquet hall, and Deos, hiding on a ceiling beam, glanced at him and told Renee that it seemed the Altia family had become close to the great moon, so they should convey good wishes to both them and the moon. She said that it was not worth doing so. According to intelligence, she was the only Altia not connected with Avalon. Therefore, she was the only one who was not Radon's target. Deos noted that this simplified matters. The rest of the Altia family would be dealt with, and Renee agreed with him. They would act on the moon's orders and focus on intercepting information to prevent Avalon's business from spreading unintentionally. Walking through the banquet hall, Alan sadly wondered why there was no one around. Maybe there was a barrier around him that was scaring people away? The lady suddenly greeted him, and he happily wondered if that greeting was addressed to him. Maybe this time he would be able to mingle with the aristocrats. He turned to face her, but upon seeing her face, he was surprised and thought, another shadow player? He had already seen her in the game. Of course, no one would have approached him first if he hadn't had some problems. He greeted her, calling her Lady Genonia, and she asked, so he knew of her? He answered that she was famous in many ways. In the kingdom of Asteria, there are 3 great shadow players: Altia from the north, Palladio from the east, and Genonia, the troublemakers from the west. And this is Count Genonia's eldest daughter, Kalia. If Palladio runs a gang, then Genonia is more like a cunningly managed crime syndicate, but he needs useful connections to lead the quiet life of a nobleman. For his own peace of mind, he cannot get involved with her. He complimented her, saying that she was beautiful, and she thanked him with a satisfied smile and invited him to talk. He told her he'd be happy to agree, but there were too many eyes around right now. He hoped he'd just leave quietly, and she smirked as she noted that he was just like the rumors said. She said goodbye, saying she'd be glad to see him again, and left. He watched her go, wondering what that meant, while Renee pointed out that the information on the Avalon case was well hidden, and Deos mentioned a new problem. He glanced at the man sitting in the tree outside the window and said that he was still being followed. It looked like he was in the crosshairs. Renee said there were no new orders. They needed to continue observing and then eliminate unwanted individuals. The ball ended, and the next morning, MC went to the canyon, hidden under a huge barrier. Evan scratched his head in confusion and asked if this was really the place he was looking for. It was midday, and it was so dark inside. Alon clenched his fist in triumph. He had finally found it. This was his real goal. They entered the canyon, and Evan said that if this place turned out to be empty, he would probably just go crazy. MC told him that this time it was all serious. In the game, this place was easy to find. He had come so far south under the pretext of a ball only because of this labyrinth of whispers. If you solve the riddles in all 8 rooms, you'll receive a powerful artifact as a reward. He'd memorized all the routes and puzzles. Now it was time for him to use his skills. They approached the enormous gates, and he looked at them in delight. He never thought he'd see the entrance to the labyrinth in person. It felt completely different. Even though he'd played through this dungeon countless times in the game, Evan noticed that everything seemed artificial, as if someone had deliberately constructed this place. How did he even know about this? Still mesmerized by the scale of the place, he told him he'd been here often, and he asked, perplexed, what he'd said. Alon realized he'd spilled the beans, and with a creepy smile, told him he was joking, that he had his own loopholes. Evan nervously asked him not to joke with that expression, and then they went inside. Evan glanced at the multitude of bats on the ceiling, and the enormous stone hands swatting them like annoying gnats, nervously noting that if they got the riddle wrong, the things would collapse. MC ignored him and thoughtfully examined the sign in front of him, while he looked at it doubtfully, wondering how he could act so calmly in such a situation. He'd been working with him for 4 years, but he still couldn't figure him out. He was simply unpredictable, destroying criminal gangs, collecting random debts, rescuing orphans, helping slaves, sending meaningless letters. He hardly left the estate, but he seemed to know everything about this place. Alon turned to him with a smile, saying that the passage would open when the mechanism was assembled. Evan approached him and thought that the reason he followed the young master was simple. Everything he did, one way or another, led to a good result. But he wondered what he had planned this time. The door opened, and MC felt sick. He knew it wouldn't be easy, but going through it in person was even worse. He nearly broke his neck trying to figure it all out. They entered the treasury, shining with gold, and Evan remarked that it looked like it was finally over. Alon said that they would take the black ring and leave, and his knight, who had already managed to collect gold, said that it looked like the most useless thing of all. He tried the ring on his thumb and told him that if they took anything else, there would be problems, so he should leave it. He smiled slightly and thought that he finally received an oath of restraint. He laughed and told the knight not to worry, there would be nothing dangerous on the way back. He followed Evan out of the treasury and thought that thanks to knowing the route from the game, everything had gone smoothly. But someone was waiting for them. Evan nervously called out to him and asked if he knew the boulders inside the canyon were golems. He drew his sword, thinking that a new unknown enemy was the worst-case scenario. If only he could at least lead the young master to safety. But MC confidently stepped forward and told him that this time, he could handle it himself. The knight became agitated and exclaimed that whatever he was planning, they first needed to find an escape route. Otherwise, it was too late. All the golems targeted Alon, and as they charged, Evan shouted that second-tier magic wasn't enough, but he had no intention of using magic. He invoked the Oath of Restraint. His voice echoed throughout the canyon, and time froze, shrouding everything in haze. The artifact called him a fragment inheriting Nyakul's great will, and told him to name 2 restrictions it could impose. MC thought that, in the game, this part appeared as a choice window. This voice belongs to the Oath of Restraint. It's an absorption-type artifact that, as its name suggests, allows one to impose limitations on oneself in exchange for power. This voice makes the world seem almost real. He named the first limitation. When using magic, he will always display the gestures of Babylon. The voice asked what he wanted with this limitation, and he said he needed the power to bend the laws of the world. The artifact granted him this. For the second limitation, he placed his hands over his mouth in a special gesture and said that when using magic, he would utter the lines of Babylon. In exchange, he needed great power to become omnipotent against the foundations of the world. The artifact remained silent. He was confused and wondered if he'd made a mistake somewhere. After all, he'd even copied the exact skill icon just in case. By selecting both limitations, gestures, and words, one could achieve maximum magical attack. Thanks to multiple playthroughs, he'd memorized all the combinations from the game, meaning everything should work. The artifact bestowed this upon him, calling him a man who remembers the wishes and secrets of a forgotten god. It expresses grace to him, the heir of the will. Alon didn't understand what this meant, after which the ring disappeared, meaning the limitation had worked. The voice finally said that it would watch over him forever, after which time began to flow again. And just as the golems pounced on him, Evan rushed toward him, worried. MC used magic and thought the ball of light should have struck everyone down, but now it looked pathetic, even though he was using up all his mana. No matter how much he trained, this was his limit. It was time to test the limitations he had imposed on himself. He uttered the Babylonian cues refraction and rejection, and sparks scattered across the canyon, reflected off the walls, and returned to him, creating a bright flash. The phrase blue light created a huge sphere above his head, and the combination of cues and gestures refracted the light and directed the spell at the golems. Seeing this, Evan's mouth dropped open in shock. Then the golems were struck by multiple bolts of lightning. After a few seconds, the light disappeared. The golems bowed in exhaustion, and then their bodies began to explode from the inside. Soon they were finished. Evan looked at this pile of stones and cursed in surprise. They walked towards the exit, and the whole way he pestered him with questions. Was he hiding his power? In 15 years of working as a mercenary, this was the first time he had seen such a thing. Was he sure it was only second circle magic? He confirmed it. In fact, he himself was very surprised. He didn't know about such a thing. It didn't exist in the game. In the psychedelia system, magic could be enhanced each turn with gestures or spells. This time, he enhanced chain lightning magic with 4 spells and gestures in just 5 turns. Simply put, he simply used standard enhancements for a powerful lightning spell. But because of his limitation, he must cast spells when using any magic. Because of this, the enhancement must have happened more than once. And yet, who would have thought that the magic of the second circle would be more than enough? The result exceeded all his expectations, and that surprised him too. They finally got out of the canyon. Evan immediately sat down and said that it was more tiring than the battle itself. He looked towards the canyon and asked who had created such a terrible place. Alon thought that the labyrinth of whispers was actually called something else. A map of the area and a guide for passing it were on the forum. Players called it Phaleon's Labyrinth because he owned it. He mumbled thoughtfully that it was created by someone named Phaleon, and Evan asked what he said. He picked him up and told him that they should go east. They had worked hard for the last 3 weeks, and now they needed to go back. He wanted to check something. Evan noted that he was much more diligent than he appeared. They continued on their way. It was already completely dark, and MC, leading the knight to the horses, thought that if he matched the gesture to the spell's properties, the power would increase. And if he chose the right spell, the gesture's properties would be enhanced. That's how the rules of the game were supposed to work. But unlike the game, where the visual didn't change and only the stats increased, this time, he clearly saw the spell change shape with each new enhancement. Maybe his mana flow was meager, but perhaps he saw these changes because he had special control over it. He'll have to check it out when his mana is restored. Whatever the case, he's glad everything worked out. Renee was there the whole time, and when she was sure they had left safely, she decided to check that canyon. Entering the labyrinth, she saw a huge inscription on the stone and thought it was from the era of forgotten gods, glyphs of the Alenef Empire. On one of the stones was written, "To my friend, doomed to betrayal, the coward Phaleon." Renee ran her hand over the glyphs and thought that the one who stopped the invasion of the black creatures and defeated Al-Aquilak, who devoured the hearts of the townspeople, was the great Emperor Phaleon. She gained all this knowledge because she was born with the ancient library after receiving a great mission. And when he whispered that the labyrinth was created by someone named Phaleon, she was surprised. She knew he was special, since the Blood Queen herself followed him, but she only heard about this from legends. And yet, she did not expect the Great Moon to be connected to Phaleon. What he whispered is not found in any book in the ancient library. Who is he? She emerged from the labyrinth and said with a smile that the Red Moon was right. She was ashamed of herself for blindly following orders. Hearing a rustle, she looked up at the tree and asked, "Did he obtain the information?" Deos told her he couldn't. The Dark One was dead. He'd simply lost his head. Renee said they'd have to report it to the higher-ups, let them sort it out. After that, they left. Meanwhile in Genonia County, Kalia sipped tea and recalled her meeting with Alon, and thought it wasn't just a rumor. He had icy indifference, the abyss itself in his eyes. Strong then? Genonia County is strong, but he considers her powerful in circles. although she doesn't even appear in public. She approached her father and asked, "Isn't that amazing? He's the count here, after all." She snapped her fingers, and his gaze immediately clouded over, after which she said with a smirk that no one had ever guessed that she'd forced her father to play by her rules in order to become head of the house. How did he figure that out? It seemed he'd noticed the surveillance she'd set up on him. Suddenly, a knight ran into the office and called her worriedly, saying that she should look in her room. She went there and saw the guy she had assigned to spy on him, but he was dead. The knight said that judging by the fact that the seal was intact, the attacker did not know the secret. She was puzzled, noting that the attackers had deliberately staged it all, after which she grinned and asked where he got the information. He had noticed her main weakness at their very first meeting. Meanwhile, Alon and Evan were on their way home, and he couldn't fall asleep because he felt that someone was talking about him. Meanwhile, Loria was returning home in a carriage. She clutched the hem of her dress and said with a bitter smile that, as expected, he should not be underestimated. He is one of the most prominent people in the criminal world. He has cold eyes, just like her father's. He is one of those with whom one should not be hostile. He was her last hope, but he wouldn't agree to a deal that promised great losses, because all her assets and power had been taken away by her cunning brothers and sisters. The eldest son, Timilan, the eldest daughter, Mariana, the second daughter, Perina, and the second son, Kig. They took everything from her, and she had nothing left. She got out of the carriage and headed towards the estate, thinking that she had lived on her father's mercy, but now she didn't know what to do next. As soon as she entered, worried servants ran up to her and told her that Perina and Kig had ended their lives. This news greatly shocked her. These people, who would rather kill their own family, ended their lives. This simply didn't make sense. She asked nervously and with a note of hope, "What happened to Timilan and Mariana?" Immediately after these words, a terrified servant's scream rang out. She checked Timilan's chambers and saw him there with his sister. They had impaled each other on swords during the struggle and died, frozen in that position. Loria was in shock and completely confused as to what was happening. Meanwhile, Radan had sneaked out of the estate, successfully eliminating them and leaving. The estate was in complete chaos. The servants scattered in panic, but Loria remained in place and suddenly remembered Alon's words. Something good will happen. The true ruler of the Count's house, the one who had been hiding his claws, waiting for a chance to seize power. Now it was clear to her what he meant, and so, overnight, she became the sole heir to the duchy. She fell to her knees in fear and wondered with what monstrous devil she had made a deal, but now there was no turning back. What happens to those who betray him? There were too many such examples. She must follow her chosen path to the end. 2 months later, a man from Duke Altia arrived at Palatio with a gift. MC opened the box, and Evan noticed it was a bottle of Cernan's wine. He'd heard one bottle was worth several thousand gold pieces. He never thought he'd see it in person. There was a note attached to the gift, and Alon thought it looked like it was from Loria, the youngest daughter, and not from the Duke himself. But why had she sent it to him? He felt awkward since he couldn't help her in any way. He asked the man if he was sure it was for him. He replied that the Duchess had personally prepared the letter and told him to deliver it. Hearing Duchess, MC was surprised and wondered if that meant the youngest daughter, Loria, had become a Duchess. That very night, Loria was working in her office. Her status as a Duchess and the pile of work had given her a more mature appearance. Deciding to take a break, she stretched and thought that 2 months had flown by so quickly. After the funeral of her father, who died of illness, she underwent the succession ceremony and became a duchess. Previously, she couldn't even set foot in this office. The death of her brothers and sisters was terribly sudden, but suspicion fell on her. But she had an alibi. She was at the ball. A secret organization got rid of her brother and sister, and when she returned to the mansion, she was completely powerless. She realized this later and was amazed. Just think, he even turned this situation to his advantage. Outwardly, he refused her without hesitation, but behind the scenes he pulled off an incredible trick. How many steps ahead had he calculated? She didn't even tell him about her father's funeral, not wanting to worry him. He must have helped her, because he needs Altia for some plan. And although she managed to unite all of Altia's subordinate organizations, this is still not enough to compare with the power he hides. This means he wants something from her. Palladio is a major figure in the criminal underworld, who rose to prominence solely through his own business. If she has one thing he doesn't, it's the ability to pull strings in the political arena. He needs Altia, but right now, she needs to focus on her own tasks. After all, the outstanding man will soon get in touch, and she hopes he liked her thank you gift. When Alan received her gift, he was very surprised. Loria was facing death, and now she's a duchess. Something is wrong here. A few months later, winter, 5 years before the beginning of the original story. Evan caught up with Alan in the corridor and called him young master, then asked if he should call him Count now. He answered that the succession ceremony hadn't taken place yet, but since a year had passed, the title was already his. He was despondent. He hadn't planned on becoming a count. The rules of the sweet life in Psychedelia: avoid a war of succession, settle in Rodmill, go on a gastronomic journey. But he will be enjoying the privileges of a nobleman to the fullest, and the work-life balance turned out to be better than he expected. Evan handed him the letter, and when they entered the office together, he asked if he had learned anything about Leo's killers. He answered that everything was quiet for now. The Information Guild was investigating, so they would give them time. So what is his goal now? He doesn't think it's about revenge. MC thought that all these small differences from the original game were most likely caused by his actions, so he answered that he was simply prepared for any surprises. He noticed that he was now speaking like a real count, and he sighed tiredly and began to read the letter. Utia told him that everything was fine. Everyone was busy with their hobbies, especially Deos, whose puppet shows had reached a professional level. Solen loved playing with friends, and Renee was now sitting quietly reading. Alon smiled and thought that their monthly exchange of news had become a habit, and each time it warmed his soul more and more. He had never seen their faces, but the thought of them doing well involuntarily brought a smile to his face. He asked how old the 5 children were now. Evan noticed that this was an unexpected question. They were ready to go out into the world. Some of them had already left the orphanage. Those he had ordered to rescue were now about the same age. The image of sweet children instantly collapsed in his mind and was replaced by submissive adults. This made him a little uneasy, and he said that it was time to let them go. Evan asked if he hadn't gathered them together because of their emotional wounds. He answered that there was no need for that now. They had grown up, and for the sake of their future, it was time to let them go. He thought that he had taken enough care of them so that they would not awaken as mortal sins, so everything should be fine. Each boss battle had an overall plan, revealed through the narrative. Utia had a talent for faith, Deos had a talent for the sword, Renee had a talent for science, Solen had a talent for fighting, and Raiden had a talent for an apostle. If they applied their talents in the right areas, they would do just fine. This is just the perfect plan. He poured a pile of envelopes on the table and started writing letters, thinking that he should also prepare a gift for each of them. Later in the evening, he finished writing and joyfully exclaimed that everything was ready. Evan, who had already dozed off on the couch, immediately got up, took the letters, and went to the orphanage. MC wondered if he would get anything good from them in return when they grew up. Now the children can go out into the big world. After a while, they received the letters, and Utia called everyone together, saying that the orders had arrived, but this time he delivered them to each one separately. Everyone looked at the sealed envelope and thought about something. Utia said that first they should read the previous letters too, because his orders require special attention. Solen was very happy and asked if they could really read them. Previously, only she could read them. She replied that since he'd given each of them an order, it meant he'd decided it was time for them to see them. They read one of the letters, and Solen asked doubtfully, "Is that really an order?" Renee remarked that it sounded like ordinary chatter. Utia explained with a proud smile that he'd been disguising his orders as casual conversations from the start. She showed them the first letter as an example, the one where he'd written about his bully brother. It was the first order after the welcome letter. He designated a target for elimination and given her a task, then ordered her to report back, which read, "I hope you'll report back to me what's going on at the orphanage every month." That's when he entrusted her with the blue moon, and he'd personally chosen each of them. Deus said he understood everything, that it was all to prevent information leaks, and Utia said they must clearly understand the orders and complete their training. He asked, then maybe they should visit him in person or use communication magic. Radon agreed with him. If the problem was information leaks, why use letters? Her face immediately became serious, and she said she hoped they hadn't forgotten, that they simply needed to follow orders. Deus nervously noted her cold, unwavering loyalty and told her that he hadn't forgotten. After that, they all began reading the orders. Deus said he was told to go to Caliburn, the land of knights, and Solen, disappointed, said she needed to go to Colony, but she didn't like deserts. Radin said he had been given Raxath, a city of entertainment, and Renee told them she was told to go to Lartania, a labyrinth city. Utia, smiling, said she needed to go to the Holy Kingdom of Rosario. Everything they needed to do was written in the letter. Deus said he didn't know why, but he was told to become a knight, and the others added that he also told them not to worry. The patronage would continue. He also told them where the gifts were. Whatever the case, they would find out everything when they reached their designated locations. Utia gave them one last thing to remember. Until he spoke first, they were not allowed to mention the name Blue Moon. The next morning, they left the orphanage and went their separate ways. 3 months later, Alon continued to study magic from books. He noted with annoyance that, as expected, there was no mention of magic or spells. He would have to experiment on his own. He turned to Evan and asked how the information gathering on Leo's killer was going, to which Evan replied that the Information Guild said there was nothing yet. He touched his chin thoughtfully. It seemed the butterfly effect had gotten out of control due to him saving the 5 deadly sins. Even Loria, who was supposed to die according to the plot, became the Duchess of Altia, and she is expanding her power and influence in the criminal underworld at a terrifying rate. He put the book down and suggested that Evan stop investigating. This is a case where ignorance is bliss. In this world, almost nothing can escape the Information Guild. If he tries to find out what he should, there can only be one result. If excessive caution leads to death, then it is pointless. After all, Secret organizations will not harm him as long as he does not interfere in their affairs. They have no reason to attack him unless he himself does not interfere. He told the knight that there was simply no point in continuing, and he said that he would convey this to them. By the way, there's one more piece of news. It seems that Deos recently became a knight in Caliburn. Elon, as always, emotionlessly said that he was happy for him. 3 months passed, told the Count that Deotha created an entire knightly order, which surprised him. That means he must be at least an expert level. First comes the level of the swordsman, then the expert, and then the master. He reached this level, although not much time had passed since his appointment. Evan said that everyone was saying that the world would see the 5th sword master in less than 10 years. He asked if he was implying that he could become a Caliburn swordsman. He confirmed it. He really is talented. There must be a lot of commotion in Caliburn because of this. 6 months later, a year had passed since the 5 deadly sins left the orphanage, and just when he was getting used to the Count's work, Evan arrived with rather interesting news. It seemed that Deus had become a Caliburn swordsman and the 5th sword master. MC stared at him in surprise and after a short pause, said doubtfully that only true professionals can become masters. A swordmaster is a superhuman who has transcended the aura of the blade and discovered a unique ability called derivation. And he's saying that Deus is now a swordmaster? He clarified that he will become one soon. He hasn't yet acquired a unique ability, but the people still gave him the title of master. He had already defeated the 4th swordsman in a duel, but Caliburn had also lost its swordmaster to the northern barbarians. Alan noted with puzzlement that they had been fighting for over 10 years, and Evan said that mastering and mana control takes 15 years, while gaining a unique ability takes at least several decades. The first swordsman, Reinhardt, became the youngest master at 32. MC recalled his appearance in the game and thought Reinhardt was incredibly strong. Even with his talent, it took over 20 years, and a guy who didn't even know how to use a sword became a master. If he was only waiting for derivation, then he would soon surpass Reinhardt. He said that perhaps he would be able to use his skills sooner than expected, and Evan nodded. But when he glanced at the single letter he had received in these months, he said with annoyance that perhaps nothing would come of it. Evan waved his hand and said that he wouldn't, and he showed him the letter, saying that only Utaya writes to him. Even after leaving for the Holy Kingdom, she regularly sends news about the deadly sins she grew up with. It seems they keep in touch. I wish they would thank him for the gift, although they haven't seen his face. He even felt a little offended. He immediately slapped himself on the cheeks, trying to get the thought out of his head, and decided to return to basics. He was already grateful to them that they didn't destroy the kingdom after they awakened. He glanced at this single letter and said that so far everything is fine with them. He is happy, and Evan patted him on the shoulder, trying to support him. Meanwhile, in the capital of Caliburn, in the central district of Kirdom, the residence of a high-ranking nobleman, a huge mansion where the famous knights of the solar eclipse live. While the knights trained, their captain, Deus, watched them from the window of his office. He sighed heavily, and a girl passing by his window stopped and waved at him, calling him brother. He waved back slightly and smiled, then awkwardly coughed into his fist, getting his emotions under control. A whole year had passed, but thinking about it still made him uneasy. When he lost everything because of those black creatures, all he had left was uncontrollable rage and hatred. The fact that the Great Moon saved his life was not enough to swear allegiance to him, but he began to follow orders under the banner of the Blue Moon because Utaya promised that he would be able to take revenge. Working for the Blue Moon, he went through many dangerous missions and training, but he did not take care of himself at all. For several years, he carried out missions, laying the foundation for the fight against those black creatures, and soon enough he received his first personal order. The Great Moon left him a gift in a small hotel in the south of Caliburn, in the first room. At first, the gift didn't really impress him, but when he saw who was inside that room, his heart started beating faster. In that unexpected letter, the gift from the Great Moon was the family he thought was lost forever, the one dearer than his own life. Seeing his sister, he immediately rushed to her, hugged her tightly, and burst into tears of happiness. His younger sister, whom he thought was dead, was alive. After enjoying the hug, he pulled away from her and asked what happened to her when they were separated. He wiped her tears, and then Shelley told him her story. When those creatures dragged her away, she waited a long time in the darkness for her turn. And when her turn came to die, someone came and pulled her out of there. Thanks to a flash of light, she was saved and survived. And a couple of years later, when she was almost sold to a slave trader, she was saved by a mercenary named Evan. And then, the sponsor sent her rare medicine. She went to the dresser and pulled out a note from Alon, which was attached to the medicine. He wrote to her that he would continue to support her, she would be safe, and that she should not worry about her brother either. She smiled, saying that she was so grateful to him for everything, and Days asked in surprise, was it he who protected her? He squeezed his shoulder and wondered how the Great Moon even knew about this. After all, he hadn't told anyone about his family, and Yutea only knew that he had a connection with the black goat. And then he suddenly remembered Yutea's words. He knows everything. The puzzle fell into place, and all questions disappeared. He didn't understand why Yutea was so worried, but he turned out to be the fool. He remembered the incident at the ball, and judging by his words, he knew everything from the very beginning and was giving a hint to a child who had to survive alone. Noticing how lost in thought he was, Shelley called out to him, and he patted her on the head, thinking that he, his swordsman, had dared to show willfulness, but he had shown him generosity and mercy. After all, he lived only with hatred and a thirst for revenge against the black goat. The fact that his family survived was a priceless gift. Yutea said that he, too, would soon understand why she had to follow him. She was not a mad fanatic and did not believe him blindly. The Great Moon commanded him to go to Caliburn and become a knight, and he must repay the debt. His goal is to become the strongest swordsman in Caliburn and gather his own order of the most skilled swordsmen. The knight who came to him tore him from his memories. He bowed to him and said that the time had come. Taking his sword, Deos walked along the lined-up knights and thought that this expedition would be the first step towards a solar eclipse. He didn't care what difficulties awaited them. He would wait for the day when he could express his gratitude and repay him properly, and he would prove it under the moon. The knights of the solar eclipse set out on a campaign against the barbarians. Time passed, MC rested in the estate courtyard and enjoyed the silence, thinking that perhaps the children had simply grown up. A breeze blew, and all his notes flew out of the books in all directions, and he immediately began to catch them, and then got to work. He made another note and wondered what was wrong with his handwriting. From now on, he needed to write more legibly. Returning from the labyrinth, he focused on studying the limitations. Refraction increases the instability of the prepared spell, increasing the radius of damage. Repulsion destroys the shape, affecting the transformation of the projectile. Blue light enhances adjacent magic, for example, lightning magic. The diffraction line provides penetration, meaning it deals critical damage. But it's important to follow the rules. Don't mix types, don't repeat, and use a maximum of 4 phrases. If you make a mistake, the spell is cancelled. He scratched his forehead in confusion and thought that with his mana reserves, he could only cast the spell once a day, which is why it had taken him so long to learn. In this world, the seals and phrases of Babylon had long been forgotten, so there was zero information, no records had survived. He had to research everything himself, and he even liked it, although he had only learned magic for self-defense. He decided to test the results of 2 months of experimentation and went out onto the lawn. After using the first gesture, the magic began to gather in one place. First, he needed to remove the focal point, then disrupt the balance and summon a lightning discharge. Saying the word, fixation, he gathered it all into a ball, then compressed it to a smaller size and rift. Sparks raged and began to shoot in all directions. After that, there was a fleeting bloom, and a thick flash of lightning struck from the sky. This weak, worthless magic, using phrases, begins to grow, acquiring a specific target. He glanced at the result and noted that the order also mattered, because when he used rift first, nothing worked. Suddenly, a surprised female voice rang out behind him. Lady Genonia exclaimed that this couldn't be true, that this was the magic of the beginning. She froze in shock, and Alon looked at her in bewilderment, wondering why she was here. Her assistant exclaimed that this was the magic of the beginning, which meant he was at the level of a 7th circle mage. MC felt uneasy, since this was the penultimate level of power. After this, the guests were led to the Count's reception room. Kalia had come here for 2 reasons. First, to learn the intentions of Count Palladio, who holds a trump card capable of dealing a crushing blow to Genonia. Second, she wanted to use magic to assess the strength of the organization that had absorbed Palladio and was now protecting it. But instead, she saw something amazing, and that arrogant mage who came with her was right now sitting and trembling with fear, waiting for the Count. Biankel is a 5th-rank mage, expelled from the tower for inhumane experiments. He is capable of easily destroying an entire division of soldiers. Even with her, his longtime patron, he always acted arrogant. But now he exudes genuine horror. She had never seen him like this before. Could it be because of that magic? Finally, Alon arrived. She immediately came out of her thoughts and looked at him, and he asked what brought them to his estate. The first thing Kalia did was apologize to him for the sudden visit. She really wanted to see him. He said he wouldn't hold it against them, but he wanted to clarify something. What he used wasn't the magic of the beginning. If we were to assign a rank to his magic, then he was only in the 2nd circle. They should have felt it, but that magic has no real use. Unfortunately, it is good for neither defense nor offense. The 2 took his words as a threat that they should keep what they saw to themselves. Biankel nervously said that it seemed like he really was mistaken, and Kalia was surprised that he was so polite to him. MC felt relieved and asked, since the misunderstanding was cleared up, what was the real reason for their visit. Kalia told him that they were nearby on other business and just wanted to pay their respects. He clarified, does that mean there is no special reason? She confirmed this, and he said that unfortunately, he had business, so he could not devote much time to them. Kalia immediately stood up and said that she understood everything and was grateful that he spent at least this short time with her. Before she left, Alon advised her to visit the Duchy of Altia if she was looking for someone to talk to. He had a feeling that they would get along well. She frowned, then answered him with a nervous smile that since he said so, Perhaps she really would visit the Duchess. MC walked them to the carriage, and when they left, Evan asked if it was Junonia. Why would a ruined Western family look for them? He answered that he himself did not know. Nothing came to mind. He thought that all this was so troublesome. If rumors spread that he used such magic, those hungry for power would not leave him alone. This was a world of dark magic, after all. Obviously, there was no reason why Junonia would seek a meeting with Altia, their rival in the underground. The main thing is that they leave him alone. Meanwhile, Kalia asked, was Count Palateo's magic really the magic of the beginning? Bianco, still under the impression, answered her that it was not so. The beginning is magic that creates its own laws based on absolute, immutable principles. It's a privilege granted only to the highest archmages. But the Count was different. He himself had destroyed the foundations. He had overturned the unshakable principles, activated lightning, and torn all the foundations apart. But even after all that, he had still materialized magic. It was an inexplicable miracle, but the most important thing came later. He had summoned a forgotten god. Remembering the creature's gaze, he immediately clutched his head and said that he needed to stop thinking about it. It was dangerous to go on. He had once earned praise for his pursuit of ancient knowledge, exploring what people called the magic of a forgotten era. So she should take his word for it. She would do better not to oppose Count Palateo. She smiled nervously and noted that this meant there was no point in trying to understand his intentions. Perhaps it really was best for her to visit the Duchy of Altia. She had already become one of his pawns. 5 months later, 2 years had passed since the children left the orphanage. Evan entered the Count's office, and Alan asked him for news, preferably about the children. He replied that there was news, but not about the children. The County of Junonia and the Ducal House of Altia had formed an alliance. MC was very surprised that the two pillars of the underground had united, and Evan said that at first glance, everything was within the rules of the underground, but the information was confirmed. Alon clutched his head and thought about how much effort he had invested in the children, and now he would have to deal with a shadow alliance? Would the kingdom of Asteria fall? It couldn't be. Had she really taken his words seriously back then? He immediately dismissed the thought. This was probably a temporary alliance. With Kalia's cold and arrogant nature, this is impossible, and yet, just in case, he should be prepared. He decided to write her a letter of apology, that he may have seemed rude and distant, and so on, hoping that it would not sound too much like an excuse. After finishing, he handed the letter to Evan, and he said that he would pass on the letter to Lady Junonia through the mercenary guild and continue to keep an eye on the children. He left, and MC became curious about what Radon and Solen were doing now. Even the letter from Utaya said that the two disappeared as soon as they reached the place. He hoped they were okay. If Solen received his gift with the letter, she could have acquired the symbol of the warrior. It is a glove that, when worn, increases the chance of a critical hit by 20%. And the description for it reads, if she did not bear the sin of pride, she would have become not a fallen sinner, but a great warrior. He even told her about a hidden treasure that she could use if necessary. With her talent, she could earn a living. After all, this is a country where the world can be conquered by force. Meanwhile, in a desert country called Koloni, Solen was now wandering in one of the caves. She stretched and said that the test was finally over, after which she looked at her glove and thanked the great moon for this gift. She thought that the essence of this glove was just some kind of talisman. What she heard as a child was not a fairy tale or fiction. Her mother told her about the Lord of the Golden Mane tribe, that they were his descendants, the kings of all beastmen. The main thing for the Golden Mane tribe is a legendary relic. Passed down for hundreds of years, it grants them strength and divine authority. She received this treasure and passed all the trials and challenges in her world. Now one thing is clear to her, the great moon is her patron, and he saved her life, granting her the power to avenge the black dragon who killed her parents. Now she must repay him for this favor. A flame flared from her glove, and she waved her hand with abandon, thinking that surely the true meaning of the gift was not for her to become a simple warrior, but to become the strongest gladiator alive, to gather the scattered Golden Mane tribe and restore them to their glory. And with this power, she would slay the black dragon. She left the cave and looked at the moon, whispering that all this was for her savior. She turned and headed deeper into the desert, thinking that the Golden Mane tribe, the greatest of all beastmen, would rise again under the blue moon after 500 years. Time passed, and Evan came to Alon with news of the children the guild had found. Solen is doing great in Koloni. They even nicknamed her the Golden Flash. MC was puzzled, noting that he'd heard that somewhere before. In any case, he was glad she was doing well. Evan agreed with him. In those lands, power opens all doors. He asked, what about Radon? He hadn't written since he said he was learning to work in Raxath. He told him there was something, but the data was still being verified. Alon suddenly asked, shouldn't he be busy? Evan looked at him with fear and asked what kind of passive aggression this was. He did everything he was told. MC said that he needed to prepare. The journey to the magic tower would take at least a month. He immediately jumped up and exclaimed that he hadn't even heard of this tower. And he asked, didn't he tell him about it? Evan sighed heavily, saying that he was already used to it, and yet, a whole month to get there? It's only a week's journey to the Green Magic Tower. Alon told him they were going to the Blue Magic Tower, and he said he understood everything now. It was near the labyrinth, so it was a long way. He headed for the office exit, saying he'd start packing right away. When MC was alone, he stretched out on the couch and sighed heavily. Just the thought of having to ride in a carriage for a whole month made him tired, but it couldn't be helped. The item that would help his tiny mana reserve was right there. The labyrinth brought back memories. He'd spent a lot of time there in the game. The labyrinth in the city center is the main character leveling location in Psychedelia. The deeper you go, the higher your level and the better the loot. However, although many players have been the labyrinth, no one has ever reached the end. One player even reached the 150th floor using cheats, only to discover there were many more floors below. Just like in the game, relics and artifacts are constantly being discovered there. So the profession of magic appraiser is wildly popular and guarantees a comfortable life. Renee said she would soon be taking the appraiser exam, and with her talent, she would pass without a problem. But he feels like his gift to Renee is too small compared to the others. This thing only helps appraise equipment. He will need to help her if the gift is not enough. The labyrinthine city of Lartania is a city ruled by no one, a city of explorers and mercenaries. After passing countless shops, in the corner of the southern district, you can find a secret appraiser's shop called Murd. This shop, which quietly gained popularity thanks to its unique services, served mainly nobles and A-rank explorers, including the Lord of Lartania. Renee, who was working there, had just finished appraising his item. This device ignites a flame using mana. The Lord thanked her, and, upon closer inspection, discovered it was a relic that could be imprinted. Renee explained that the artifact could only be improved in this way. A drop of mana would sustain the fire for at least an hour. The Lord smiled and happily noted that the effectiveness had increased significantly. He left, thanking her, and when she was alone, she removed the mask from her face and sighed. She turned around and noticed an item that could also be imprinted, and she set about it. The reason this corner shop was so famous was because imprinting was a gift from the Great Moon. She entered the dark room where the imprinting device was located, and she had already used it 247 times out of 500. When he first told her to become an appraiser, she didn't understand why. The Great Moon was a friend of Phalion from the Age of Forgotten Gods. She understood that all this was for the sake of exterminating the black creatures, but she simply didn't see the connection between the order to become an appraiser and the goal. When she arrived in the city, she constantly wondered how this job would help kill the black creatures. But as soon as she saw his gift, she understood everything. The Eye of Insight quickly identifies items below a certain threshold of mana, aiding in appraisal. As soon as she touched the eye, she realized that this thing was different. Its essence wasn't even in the library. When the shackles were removed, the seal was also removed. To gain the power to fight the black creatures, she must awaken this item. It was an ability that required sacrifices, and now the eye had imprinted itself on the item, increasing the number to 248. She glanced at the seal with a smile and thought that she needed to make another 252 sacrifices before fully awakening it. In exchange for increasing the relic stats, the eye absorbed something from it, essentially causing it to transform. The eye only reacts to special, high-ranking relics. If the wrong item is sacrificed, the power disappears. Only she can accurately evaluate all the relics and select high-ranking victims for imprinting, for she was born with the Library of Eternity, and all for the sake of killing the Black Wolf, all according to the will of the Great Moon. 3 weeks later, the Blue Magic Tower. As soon as they arrived, they went to meet with the head of the tower, but he was not there. Instead, they were met by his deputy, Phenia Chrisen, a mage of the Sixth Circle, and she was not very friendly. She told them to state their reason for coming and leave, as she was busy. Alon thought her face looked familiar. He had seen her in the main story, but for now she was only the deputy. She was a genius like few others, and she reached the 8th Circle at the age of 20, and then became the head of this tower. Not only is the magic tower powerful, they have monopolized the production of certain important goods, elevating their status to that of nobility. Although the authority of a deputy head who has surpassed human limits must be very high, this is already too much. He introduced himself to her and said he came to talk about the time gate, and she, without looking up from her work, asked, "So what next?" When she stated that she could close the time gate, she froze. The time gate is a rift connecting to a mysterious subspace, appearing where magic is frequently used. This causes anomalies that cause enormous damage. Phenia assessed his magic and grimaced, muttering, how on earth was he going to do this with such pathetic talent? She waved her hand, shooing him away, and he became worried, because everything must be different. He said he needed an answer, and she asked irritably, is he going to close the time gate and take the treasure? She slammed her palm on the table in anger and exclaimed, does he even have any idea how many people come here with this every day? He told her he was telling the truth. Let her take him to the gate, and he will show her everything. He was upset that she didn't believe him, and she rudely said that she understood that he needed something grandiose to change public opinion, because people were starting to guess that he only became an earl by luck when his brothers died. However, that didn't mean he could come here and make a fuss. Her terrifying magic instantly filled the entire office. MC involuntarily took a step back and thought, are such rumors circulating? Maybe it's because he used to live a relatively quiet life? She looks like she's always busy, but surprisingly well informed about all the news. However, she's too scary. Evan whispered in his ear that she had an amazing magical aura, and he thought that he was desperate, so he needed to do this. He went to her and said that if he couldn't close the time gate, he would give all his possessions to the magic tower, and she called it all nonsense. He stated that if she wanted, he could swear an oath. It's a pretty good offer, isn't it? She was hesitant, but she still agreed. After that, she led him to the room where the gate was and reminded him that, as promised, all his wealth would become hers as soon as he failed. He confidently told her that this would not happen, and then opened the doors, and she thought it was the perfect moment. She wondered if he would turn out to be a new recluse or just a good-for-nothing lucky person. After listening to him for a while, she was convinced that he was closer to the latter. Despite first impressions, he has a tiny reserve of mana and a slightly above-average ability to sense energy, a talent on the very border of the second circle. What is he going to do with it? The truth is, there's no need to close the gate. In 3 months, they would disappear on their own, discarding the relic. That would be the end of it, and no mage capable of closing the time gate would ever appear. However, the time gate in the blue magic tower continued to rage for over 2 years. The two of them approached the gate, and she said that if he couldn't do anything, then he should leave the room. Noticing how he touched his index finger, she asked irritably, is he planning to use his hand as a conduit instead of a staff? Even ancient magical tomes classified this as a primitive method. It was a method considered practically a fairy tale. She continued to dissuade him, not at all believing that he would succeed. And then Alon uttered a word and time froze. Phinia was terrified, realizing that it wasn't she who couldn't move, but everything around her had frozen. She glanced at Alon with a spell-assessing magic and saw an unknown, terrifying creature above him. It opened its eye, staring straight at her. The eye sees the very essence of the unknown. It's simple. But she mustn't think about anything under any circumstances. She was very scared. Her thoughts couldn't calm down. They flashed through her mind, constantly changing. At the same time, she tried to curb her feelings, shut up the voice in her head, but she couldn't. The creature extended its hand to her, put 2 fingers together, and ordered her to maintain absolute silence. The voice in her head immediately died down. She understood the creature's demand. After that, it closed its eye and evaporated, and she could finally move. MC turned to her and said that the gate was closed. He would take the relic from here. He thought that it was a trifle for him. He only needed special items. He would still need it, so he used a suggestion spell. He wondered if she believed him. Phinia, grinning with fear, said that she would not tell anyone about this, and he wondered if his bluff had really worked. He walked towards her and said that he appreciated it, but there was no need. She immediately backed away from him and exclaimed that she would keep quiet. She would not tell anyone. She knew how to keep a secret. It was true. He did not understand why she was suddenly so agitated, then returned to Evan and said that they were leaving. Phinia caught up with him and excitedly asked him to wait. She showed him the mana potions and said that she had brewed them all herself. Let him take them. He took 1 vial and thought that these were high-quality potions, and she asked if he liked everything. He was surprised, because a couple of vials cost as much as several lower-rank artifacts. He was afraid to even think about the price. She was so grateful that he closed the gate. She became very nervous and returned to his request, promising him that she would keep quiet. She excitedly snapped her fingers and exclaimed, maybe she should take the mana oath? He was confused, as he hadn't thought such a trifle required an oath. He realized she'd misunderstood something and was about to explain everything to her, but she cast spells and magical chains immediately bound them both, imposing an oath, after which the poor, frightened girl said that she always keeps her word. He didn't do anything else. He couldn't resolve this misunderstanding. So, in the Blue Tower of Magic, he received the coveted relic, 5 potions, and an oath. They went back to the county, and Evan looked at the bracelet and asked if this was the treasure from the gate. He had gotten it with difficulty, but it looked easier than he thought. Did it even work? He answered that, in any case, he needed this thing. He smiled slightly and thought that this was the seal of the unholy. He was glad that he got it without any problems. The stone in the bracelet absorbs mana from the air and stores it. It works perfectly. The capacity is small, but for his crumbs, mana is more than enough. He glanced out the window and thought with a heavy sigh that his body has less mana than this thing, but his goal is exploration and survival, not battle, so this will be enough. Now he wonders what she was thinking. This sudden politeness is suspicious. She even came out to see them to the carriage, and he, to avoid misunderstanding, said that he was a mage of the second circle. She smiled nervously and said that he looked exactly like a mage of the second circle. Of course, this could not be fixed. Last time Kalia reacted the same way, he was still worried. But it does not matter anymore. He will not see them again anyway, so everything will be fine. He noted that the weather is fine today, and Evan agreed with him. Meanwhile, in the Duchy of Altia, Loria met Lady Genonia and said that they had not seen each other for a long time. She should make herself at home. Kalia smiled and replied that she hadn't changed a bit and was glad to see her. Loria remarked that it was convenient that they didn't have to share power or discuss status, and she agreed. Count Palladio's insight was astounding again. She recalled his words and thought that by following his advice, she had quickly grasped his true intentions. During their conversation, they both realized they were inferior to Palladio. In any case, this alliance was created by Count Palladio's will. Since the struggle for power is meaningless in the face of an absolute leader, Genonia and Altia became close allies. Loria said the meeting was scheduled for next month. What was the purpose of her visit today? She replied that the Count had sent a letter, using her visit as a pretext. She placed the letter on the table, and Loria read it. The letter spoke of noble families and how they didn't have many friends among them. Kalia said it looked like a simple letter of apology, but Loria understood everything without her saying it. There must be a hidden meaning. Kalia smiled slightly nervously and suggested that she discuss it. They began discussing the line where he talks about having few friends, and the conversation turned to the faction of royalists, aristocrats, and others. And they concluded he doesn't like either aristocrats or royalists. Does that mean he wants to kill them all? Loria noted that they should think rationally, and Kalia agreed with her. Then he wants to remove the current nobility and establish a new regime. That's the conclusion they came to together. Loria sighed wearily and said that now she understood everything. He was simply interested in Altia's prestige. If the hegemon of the West is with him, then of course. Kalia agreed with her, and they decided to discuss the plan. Meanwhile, in the Blue Tower of Magic, the tower's lord finally returned, and his second-in-command told him about the closing of the gate. He was surprised and asked her to tell him everything in more detail, but she wasn't particularly eager, so the pieces of the crazy puzzle accidentally fell into place. At this time, the Count decided to take a break, but suddenly he coughed while eating, and Evan asked if he was okay. He told him that he choked on a sweet potato and took the water from Evan's hands, saying that it was still delicious. He wanted to hurry home. It was time for a letter from Utia to arrive. At this time, she was in the Holy Kingdom, serving as a nun, as the Great Moon ordered. What did Phineas say when the master of the tower and also her teacher returned? Cillian Micardo, a mage of the 8th Circle, looked into the office in search of his student and said that he no longer felt the gate. What happened? Phineas looked at him with a devastated look and said that she had finished the work he assigned her. Seeing his student in such a state, he became worried and wondered if something serious had happened. She wasn't even angry at him like usual. He approached her and asked what had happened, but she no longer answered him. Ever since she had become Deputy Tower Master at such a young age, thanks to her talent, her arrogance and frivolity had skyrocketed. She always brought poor newcomers to tears. However, he had no intention of correcting her character, because she was sincere about magic. As soon as she reached the 7th Circle, she would immediately realize the futility of her achievements and become more modest. The situation was rather strange. He laughed awkwardly and said that his business trip to the north had been delayed this time. Had she had too much work in his absence? She clutched her head, then raised her tired gaze to him and told him about the gate. He asked if she couldn't give details because of her oath. She told him that, in fact, there wasn't much to tell. That was all she could say. He patted her head with a satisfied grin, thinking that she had been subdued by incomprehensible magic, or rather, by the magic of the beginning. Was she so frightened that she didn't even fight off his hand? He was very interested in this Count Palateo from the kingdom of Asteria. A month had passed since returning from the Blue Tower of Magic. Having received the Seal of the Unholy, Alan had seriously begun researching phrases, since he could now use magic more often. The rules for phrases had also been expanded. Using similar phrases could cause an overlapping effect. It seemed he needed to properly set up a certain phrase beforehand. He wrote down the rule and looked around, saying that perhaps there was a connection with the location and method of installation, but he wasn't sure. Evan approached him and noted that his magic was getting stronger each time. It hadn't been like 2nd Circle magic before, but now it was on a completely different level compared to a couple of months ago. MC glanced at the huge depression in the ground and agreed, saying that a normal gravity spell couldn't create such a crater. Gravity, 2nd Circle magic. Even at maximum power, it wouldn't be enough to crush someone to death. He thought. He imagined himself getting stronger. Maybe it wasn't an illusion? If there was a reason for the increase in power, it wasn't due to skills or phrases. Increasing magical mastery means increasing precision and understanding, and phrases are more like triggers that change attributes. He spent months studying the array of phrases for gravity, and lately he'd been alternating almost the same phrases. In the end, he discovered that the power only increases gradually as the structure optimizes. He said he must have imagined it. Otherwise, the numbers wouldn't add up. There's no reason for such a sudden jump in power. Maybe he's just in good shape. Evan said he brought him a letter from Utia. It had just been delivered. Alon thanked him and decided to go to his room and read this in silence. Evan asked if he had finished training yet. He answered that he could only cast magic 3 times a day now. Afterwards, he thought, since he had reached the limit, maybe this was a reward for the curse. What was the reason for the sudden increase in his magic? A curse is an Eastern ritual in which the caster sacrifices himself to cast a curse on another or himself. Under the influence of the curse, the target suffers a loss but receives a reward as compensation. There are no Easterners in his circle, so it is unlikely. Maybe he receives the energy of faith, but that's nonsense. He is the count of a small kingdom that even the criminal underworld ignores. He decided not to dwell on it. Sometimes it's better to ignore it and move on. It can't get any worse, right? The Holy Kingdom of Rosario, the capital of Rionel, a snow-white city where people worship the goddess of the moon and peace, Chironia. Utia was now in the eastern prayer house. She was standing by the statue and praying when a paladin named Rourke approached her and greeted her. She turned to him with a smile and greeted him back, and he thought that she was a nun of lower rank than a paladin and did not even wear the belt of holy grace. However, he was obliged to show respect. He bowed to her and told her that this time they saved 8 children and 25 adults in small villages to the east and west, all thanks to her. She said that it was all thanks to his good deeds, to which he replied that it was she who guided him, an ignoramus, and he would always be grateful for it. He spent 20 years in despair because he did not even feel the divine power, and when he was on the verge of giving up, she came to him and said that if he thirsted so much, then he should try to believe in the moon. He didn't understand what she was talking about, and she said he would understand when he tried it himself. He was so desperate that he was ready to do anything. He prayed for several days, as she ordered, and miraculously mastered divine power. He was so happy, but he succumbed to a momentary temptation and believed in the moon, not the goddess. He was afraid that he had stepped onto the path of heresy. However, all power bestowed by the gods is one. Even the artifacts of the goddess shone in his hands, confirming his divine power. One day he asked her why she told him to believe in the moon. She answered him, because faith is born from an invisible conviction, but takes time to manifest. It is much easier to draw strength from something that really exists. The moon will always be with them. He looked at the sky and said that he understood, because the goddess is the moon itself. This is a way for people of little faith to find firm faith. He bowed to her and thanked her with all his heart, and now she offered him to pray together if he wanted to express his gratitude. He answered her with a smile that he was ready to do it again and again, and she noticed that he had come just in time for prayer. There were already so many people there. They entered the temple. Utia walked along the rows of gathered believers to the altar, after which she opened the book and waved her hand, inviting them all to pray to their lord, the great moon. Utia Bledia, now a nun of the Holy Kingdom of Rosario. MC read her latest letter, but there was nothing special in it either. Just the usual news about life, which means everyone is doing well. This is, of course, great, but still, he is a little sad that he hasn't received a single letter except from Utia. Although they can understand, they haven't even seen his face. For them, he is just a guy to whom they are grateful, or probably even just some random kind person who helped them. In any case, he achieved his goal. He kept them on the right path, and they will not destroy the world. There is nothing to be sad about. He tried to calm down, but he was still sad. Utia was probably busy, but she still sent him letters every month. He raised 5 children, and only the eldest appreciates his efforts. He almost shed a tear from sadness, and suddenly Evan appeared from behind the couch and asked if he was busy. He almost screamed in fear, then awkwardly cleared his throat and asked, "So he was here all this time?" Evan told him that news about the children had come from the Information Guild. He was going to pass it on to him right away. He approached him and said that there was news about Radon, whom he asked about last time. He was now a pirate. This news was very unexpected for him, and he asked him to tell him everything in more detail. Evan said that Solen and Deos had the most rumors. They say Solen has already won 32 victories in a row, and to challenge for the title of Baba Yaga, she needs 100. Alon was surprised and asked, "Who is the fighter with the longest winning streak?" He answered, "The Lion King, with 41 victories." He thought, isn't this that cool character that temporarily joins your party in the game? Coloni has so many monsters that they rely on fighters as their military might, and she's almost reached the top. Evan moved on to the news about Deos. Rumor has it that they destroyed one of the 8 barbarian chieftains, Kurga of the Snowfield. They are monsters who became superhumans through rituals. He knows them, right? MC thought he knew them too well. In the game, he had to fight barbarians and even deal with their god, Altertus. He's glad he doesn't have to deal with that. Altertus appears only after the descent of the 5 great sins. Going through that episode was a real headache. He said he thought Deos was no longer a worry, and Evan said that after such a feat he was treated like the first swordsman, Reinhardt. This made Alon curious, and he thought about meeting him in person. That would be nice. Evan said that Renee, who had become an appraiser, was said to cast black seals that enhance the power of artifacts. MC noted that she was doing quite well on her own, but the most important thing remained. Expecting the worst, he nervously asked, what about Radon? Had he really become a pirate? Evan asked if he had heard of the 7 archipelagos off the coast of Rax. Great pirates live there. They say he became a captain and rules the largest of them, the first archipelago. Alon clutched his head in horror and thought that this couldn't be true. He had sponsored the child for years. He just wanted him to grow up happy and live a normal life. And he became a pirate? This is just a mockery. He can't believe that this pointless internet post actually became his reality. He was very upset and said that's not why he sent him there. Radon is excellent at detecting enemies. As a representative of the rare race of the sea god, he is at home in the water. The sea is full of rare artifacts, so he advised him to become a treasure hunter. It was a promising career. He specialized in finding enemies. Evan decided to cheer him up and said that if he is a great pirate and captain, then, in fact, he is the lord of this island. He is a truly important person. MC was still upset and wondered how Radon managed to dethrone the captain of the first archipelago. All the captains there are superhumans, and the pirates of the 7 archipelagos are invincible in sea battles. Did he really manage to collect the best ancient artifacts? He wasted a lot of time playing the treasure hunter minigame to get good equipment. Did Ree really become a captain only because of items? He covered his face with his hand in disappointment and thought that he knew that everything in this world was not going according to plan. But for some reason, his soul was so bitter. His child became a pirate, and the realization of this completely despaired him. The heart of the Duchy of Korkia, the great sea city of Raksath, and in the waters before it, 7 pirate paradise islands stretched. The largest paradise among them is the first archipelago. Once upon a time, a captain ruled here who received the blessing of the heavenly king through sacrifice, the great pirate, the red assassin, Alcraid, and whoever defeated him became the new captain of the first archipelago. Radon surveyed his domain from a high tower and smiled, but one thought still bothered him. He scratched his head in confusion and wondered who the Great Moon even was. Before, he hadn't cared. He hadn't really thought about it. At first, he was only grateful to it. He would have died a slave to the experiments, but thanks to it, he met Utia and even awakened his abilities. To be honest, in the Blue Moon, he was just following Utia. So when a direct order finally came from the Great Moon, he didn't understand it. Was there even any point in becoming a treasure hunter? He even found it disgusting. On an unknown island, his peaceful family was slaughtered by these black creatures. On the continent he barely escaped to, hunters killed his exhausted parents and sold him into slavery. He didn't think that being a treasure hunter or this gift would help him achieve his revenge. He decided to pretend to obey and went there. He saw a ship making noise and setting off fireworks, and the faces of the sailors were very familiar to him. They were wanted, and more. These pirates, enjoying themselves on their ship, were the ones who killed his parents. Only a chosen enemy can receive the blessing of the heavenly king through sacrifice. Long live the chosen captains of the 7 archipelagos. That's what they talked about while gulping down their drinks. Radon's gaze immediately turned murderous, and he thought that these idiots really managed to seize that power. The heavenly king? They were deliberately talking nonsense. Through a sacred ritual using a body part of a member of the sea god race, they gained the power bestowed only by the sea god, Claired. Every captain of the 7 archipelagos used this. These hunters deliberately divided the remains of his parents into 7 parts. At that moment, he was overcome with intense rage, but a question also arose. How did the Great Moon know about this? After all, he had never spoken about himself before. It was as if the Great Moon itself had orchestrated everything, created an opportunity for revenge, so as to keep his word. He couldn't take revenge directly then. After all, they were superhumans wielding the power of the sea god. So he left with the thought that if all of this was predetermined, then this gift also had a reason. The Great Moon had surely calculated everything, prepared the foundation for his revenge. When he found the gift, he immediately decided to test it out. He ran and jumped from a high cliff straight into the sea. The relic immediately activated, and the glasses appeared. The Great Moon's gift was the Amrita glasses, which allowed him to easily locate relics in the depths of the sea. The artifacts he found compensated for his lack of brute strength. He realized it was foolish to simply feel gratitude. The Great Moon fulfilled its promise. It not only brought the target of his vengeance directly to him, but also granted him the power to accomplish it. Having recovered several treasure chests from the seabed, he fully understood the meaning of the letter's command. The Great Moon's true intention was for him to seek revenge and seize power over the 7 archipelagos. And he remembered Utia's words, "Never forget that everything is for the Great Moon." The phrase, which had previously been empty words to him, gradually transformed into an unquestionable belief and was carefully engraved on his heart. Everything is for the Great Moon. 3 months later, when the stifling heat had subsided, autumn arrived, the time when Asteria holds the Great Gathering, which happens every 2 years. Alon was also forced to participate. They were heading to the meeting place, and the whole way he was whining about how much he hated it all. 2 carriages pulled out from other roads adjacent to the main one, and Evan, glancing at them, told the Count that, as usual, the Krild and Edorn families were also involved. MC was irritated by all this, but such were traditions. You need to unite in groups to fight off bandits. And when they reached the inn in the evening, he realized one thing. Nobles are much worse than bandits. The 2 immediately started attacking him with questions, not letting him drink in peace. They wanted to know why he only had 1 guard. The rumors were true. He really had snuck south. He He was very irritated by all this, but he needed to control his temper. It would have been better if they gossiped behind his back, although it was logical that they would think so. After all, the Palladio family's notoriety rested on their control over the vast eastern criminal underworld and the wealth accumulated in that very underground, but he was satisfied with everything, so he abandoned the shady dealings. He already made a good living, and the underground was dangerous, so he didn't need it. And so today's eastern criminal underworld is teeming with small fry eager to fill the void, and the rumor that his title of count had come to him by pure chance had become generally accepted fact. He already knew that he had turned into a lucky blockhead, although he used to be the brains of the count, but he didn't think that they would insult him so openly. Aren't they a bit old to behave like this? The two continued to mock him about his financial situation, laughing loudly, and he thought that these guys were already crossing all boundaries. And then a thought occurred to him. They were Pallateo's victims, right? Krill and Adorn were Pallateo's errand boys, so they were taking out their old grudges on him. Although, what did he have to do with it? It reminded him of online arguments. He wished he could record it as a memento. Evan, as always, approached him with a plate of food and noted that they were still arguing. Alon decided to simply ignore them and asked where he'd been. He told him he'd stopped in the kitchen and gotten some roasted corn. He remarked that it looked quite appetizing, after which the two of them began to eat, and he thought that food was always divine, especially on such a quiet evening. The two began rhyming insults like rapping, but he continued to ignore them and said that the corn was quite tasty. Evan remarked that it would be better with butter, and the two were furious that he was completely ignoring their words. Fast forward to the north, a land of bitter cold overrun by barbarians. Only the gray sun shines here, as if reminding that there is no life here. One of the surviving barbarians from the recent massacre whispered in rage that these dogs of Caliburn know nothing of honor. He, the great Kirkhan, one of the 8 barbarian chieftains, was defeated. For barbarians who worship battle, death in combat is the highest honor. However, the knight Caliburn deceived them, claiming he wanted a fair duel. And so Kirkhan was defeated by a blow to the back. He tried to get up, but the wound took its toll, and he fell back exhausted. Lying in the snow awaiting death, he wondered what had become of Kurga of the snowfields. He glanced at the threads of the knight captain and the broken blades lying nearby, and told his friend that a shameful fate had befallen him. So shameful that he could not even close his eyes before dying. A voice suddenly came from the sky, calling Kirkhan brother, and telling him to call his great name, the name he worshipped, his name. Kirkhan wept tears of blood and quietly uttered the name of his god, Altertus, before plunging into darkness. But he had no intention of dying like this. He gathered all his strength and rose, calling out to the great god, Altertus. He dared to call his venerable name. Altertus, looking down on him from the sky, promised to fulfill his wish. Meanwhile, MC was still on the road. The tension did not subside, even as they rode to the gathering place. Even when other noble houses joined them, the mockery from these two did not stop, but he simply ignored it. All gamers know not to feed the trolls. Night fell, they stopped for a rest, and in the end, Alon, the one who ignores, defeated the one who is trying so hard to offend him. They didn't bother him anymore, and one of them asked how the extra security was. The old man replied that he had checked with the artifact. It was indeed just that kid and the crazy knight, no one else. How dare they intermarry with the nobility? The man said that meant the rumors about them being just dead weight were true. They could immediately move on to their plan to infiltrate the underworld. Finally, they wouldn't have to fear those Palladio idiots. Finally, they would be able to lay their hands on the incredible wealth and power of the underworld. The old man asked, since they were going to take everything, maybe they should give him a gift too? He'd thank them when he learned how terrible this world was. The man laughed, and suddenly a strange scream came from the distance. The knights immediately became alarmed, and the two found themselves right in the path of the monsters emerging from the forest. They took off running, the knights defending the nobles, and a single mage provided them with visibility in the dark night. With a wave of his staff, the mage instantly illuminated all the creatures hiding among the trees. They were goblins, but strange ones, with crystalline growths on their skin. Seeing that they were just goblins, the knights breathed a sigh of relief. They were weak monsters, often found in forests, but if there were too many of them, they would pose a significant threat. Seeing how the goblins instantly dealt with the knights in the front ranks, the others grew nervous. One of them said, "This is madness. The entire outer guard was killed? What the hell happened here?" The problem is, no one had ever seen goblins like these. They have a completely different body structure. Some new mutation must have occurred, and they are overflowing with mana, which means their physical strength is radically different from what they are used to. Everyone understood this perfectly well, and therefore feared it. The entire goblins rushed at them with incredible speed. The knights braced themselves for a collision, but suddenly a stone wall rose between them. The goblins crashed into it, fell, and shattered, while the rest were trapped within a magical barrier. The mage was surprised. It was the stone wall of the third circle and the shield of the second. But was there another mage here? Alon whispered a phrase, and everyone immediately turned at the sound. Then he punched and used compression, shrinking and ripping the protective barrier containing the goblins and stones from the ground. The remaining monsters stood stunned and watched. The orb rose into the sky, and everyone in the area literally felt the power of his spells. Then MC stepped forward, clenched his fist, drawing the air out of the orb, creating a vacuum and compressing everyone inside even more tightly. Then he waved his arms and returned everything to its source. The ball exploded, and the stones inside scattered across the area with great force, turning the goblins into a sieve. Chunks of monster flesh rained down from the sky, and the nobles and knights were stunned by the sight. Alon turned to them and asked why they were frozen. They needed to prepare. Immediately after, a new wave of monsters rushed towards them. The knights prepared and responded to the goblins' attack, MC periodically attacking them with spells, and Evan fought beside him. The battle continued until the first rays of sun, when the knights struck, and finally, all the monsters were finished. The nobles hiding in the forest emerged from their shelters, and the knights rested and looked with smiles at the man who had instilled fighting spirit in them, wondering who he was. Alon was terrified at this time, his heart pounding with fear. Understandable, after all, he almost died. The daily spell limit has increased, but it's still only 3 or 4 times. Halfway through the fight, he becomes a normal human, and his pitiful mana reserves are completely depleted. Evan approached him and asked if he was injured, and he thought that even with him by his side, losing the ability to defend himself was terrifying. Noticing how he was shaking, Evan asked if he was sure he was okay. He pulled himself together and confirmed it, thinking that he had considered going alone to avoid the noise, but joining the nobles had turned out to be the right decision. He glanced at the crystal growths on the goblins and thought that this amethyst was the real problem. Why did divine descent happen? Divine descent is a strange phenomenon that occurs when a god attempts to descend into their world. Monsters affected by this phenomenon become ferocious, and their physical stats increase. How is this possible? This shouldn't have happened. Apparently, these are gods from the outskirts who should appear only after the descent of the 5 great sins and the collapse of the world's laws. This is their way of hinting that they will soon descend upon these lands. He touched his head in puzzlement with a gloomy face and thought that the children had not even awakened yet as the 5 great sins. What the hell was the problem? He decided to gather information immediately upon arrival. If this continued, heads would soon roll, and when he thought about this, he glanced at those two, and they were even scared by his gaze. The next day, they arrived at the ducal house of Rotigray. MC, who was quite sick from the ride, got out of the carriage and said with relief that they were finally there. One difficulty comes another. The curtain rises over the great cathedral. Alon barely hobbled to the stairs, and to keep him from falling, he needed Evan's help. Soon the welcoming ceremony began. Everyone gathered in the banquet hall. MC remarked that this was the perfect place for a grand reception, everything made of gold. Evan examined the glass of wine and said that it was all for show, to flaunt their wealth. They were unlikely to notice if they took something with them, but for some reason, it was difficult for him to do so. Laughter was heard from the sidelines. The men commented on the Duke's youth. The Duke, accompanied by his ladies, responded by saying that his chicks were bothering him, and the men laughed, advising him to take care of his health. Alon stepped aside and thought, maybe he shouldn't bother the other nobles? He didn't really want to do that himself. Someone called out to him. He turned and saw the two of them. Only this time they weren't mocking him anymore, but fawning over him, offering him the best meat, gold, and other benefits. He bowed his head in displeasure and wondered what was wrong with them. His face seemed very creepy to them. They immediately retreated in fear and realized that they should not have messed with him. The day before, after the battle with the goblins, the two stared at the Count in horror, and one of them asked the other, "Did he see that?" The man grabbed his head and said that it was magic. After that, they both grabbed the mage by the arm and led him away, telling Baron Almon that they would borrow her for a while. The third circle mage, whom Baron Almon hired to throw dust in people's eyes, was perplexed, and the man exclaimed that she had seen that spell. It was the second circle, right? She was slightly confused and said with delight that it couldn't be. That spell was much more powerful than her magic. They were both shocked. Then it was at least the third circle. Now they realized that the rumors about him becoming an Count by pure accident were untrue. He hid a strength that required no guards and his true nature as a cold and cruel aristocrat. They decided to pay him off to save their skins, but they would have to beg. At that moment, they bowed to him and began to apologize for their arrogance and rudeness, and also begged for mercy. MC didn't even know how to react. He couldn't even imagine what they were thinking. Evan asked if they should just finish them off. He replied that if they made a fuss, they would be in trouble. Although he was usually merciful, this time they had crossed the line. He would deal with it himself. After that, he thought that he couldn't do anything to them anyway. Well, fine, let them be afraid. Under his cold gaze, the two burst into tears of fear and realized that they were finished. The banquet continued. Alon sent Evan to the Information Guild and decided to listen to what the nobility was whispering about. He took a cake from the table and noticed two men who seemed to be having a secret conversation. He enhanced his hearing with mana. They were talking about Altia and Genonia, trying to create their own faction. MC decided not to listen to them anymore, as they were talking about nonsense. He didn't even have to worry about it. These two families can't stand each other, so their alliance won't last long. He took a bite of the cake and thought it was so delicious, and the conversation between the two continued, now truly secret. The head of the faction is not one of them, but Palladio. Hearing this, Alon turned to them in shock. his mouth open. And when they clarified that it was the Count who arranged all this, he practically dropped the cake from his hands. He turned away from them and thought, what kind of nonsense is this? He saw Duchess Altia once when she was younger, and Janonia's daughter twice. He doesn't even know the current Count of Janonia. Where did this rumor come from? He should have expected something like this. It's all just gossip and empty speculation. Someone called out to him, and he glanced at them, thinking that everyone was pestering him today. Carmine, the third son of Duke Comelon of the Kingdom of Ashkelon, approached him and greeted him. MC was slightly surprised at first, having forgotten that nobles from other countries also came to such receptions. He briefly introduced himself to him in response, and he said with a grin that he had heard that he had become a count by pure chance. He envied him so much that he simply had to look at him. What was his secret? He remained silent and thought irritably that even pretzels could talk these days. The man, having heard this, angrily asked what he had just said. He stood in front of him, blocking Alon's view, and asked if he dared to mock a nobleman of their kingdom of Asteria. He immediately became nervous and began to make excuses and thought, what was going on? He thought that he could be mocked with impunity. He is Carmine Comelon, a luxurious man who came from a distant land to marry the youngest daughter of Rottigray. He is so perfect that no woman can resist him. As he strolled with his fiancée through the banquet hall, he noticed two ladies passing by and remarked that one could do with losing weight, while the other had a rather large nose. His fiancée was disgusted by all this, and when he turned to compliment her, she couldn't stand it and slapped him. After which she left, suggesting that he reconsider their engagement. He was very surprised and didn't understand at all why the wedding was called off and his fiancée left so hastily. Sadness quickly gave way to anger. After all, he had come all this way for this. And then Count Palladio caught his eye. He had heard that he was a brat without connections, which made him the perfect target for letting off steam. But he was wrong, and now three aristocrats were pressuring him. Looking at them, MC thought that a very interesting situation was developing. Although he was far from politics, he knew these three by sight. The Duke of Rodigra, an important figure among the nobles, the Marquis of Mardanio, an important figure among the royalists, and Count Palin, the center of the moderate faction. And these three have now stood up for him. They are the pillars of the kingdom of Asteria. The Duke of Rottigray said that Duke Comelon must despise them, and he exclaimed that this was not so at all. Then Palin asked why he addressed a nobleman with such disrespect. He bowed his head like a guilty puppy and said that he was mistaken, and the Marquis replied that the point was that he had shown him disdain. Alan thought how disgusted they must be that these three, who barely knew him, had rushed to his defense. He kept wondering why this scene seemed familiar. It was the same in the army. It even brought back some childhood traumas. Unable to withstand the pressure, Carmine ran away in tears, apologizing to him, after which the three turned their attention to Alon and began bombarding him with questions about whether he was okay. He felt uneasy from all the attention and heard a snippet of the two men's conversation. If such important people were fussing, the rumors seemed to be true. If Altia and Janonia got involved in politics, the power of Count Palladio, their leader, would become limitless. MC rubbed his neck tiredly and wondered if this was all because of that rumor. If this continued, there would be problems. Maybe he should explain to them that it was all nonsense? Marzik Mardanio told him that he hadn't really spoken to him, and Rodigris said he must be very busy. They didn't let him get a word in. The Marquis said he'd heard he'd been studying magic lately. He just happened to come across an excellent artifact and wanted to give him a mana accumulator. Other nobles also wanted to give him a gift, and Alan wondered if he should tell them it was a mistake. But he couldn't resist the temptation and remained silent, and so he received 2 magical artifacts and 5 mana potions. At dawn, in Duke Rodigray's outbuilding, Marquise Mardanio met with a mysterious woman in black, and she asked how everything had gone. He replied that, fortunately, he had accepted the gift. Modest gifts among nobles are simply a sign of politeness, but valuables such as artifacts carry deep meaning. For someone wishing to join a faction, presenting a gift to its leader signifies a desire to join it. The woman said with a smile that she was glad to hear that he had been accepted. He laughed and said that it was all thanks to her, and then she congratulated him on joining the faction. Now they officially pursued the same goal. This woman turned out to be Duchess Altia. He said it was a great honor, and they all readily agreed. A member of the Altia family, who rarely makes moves, personally appeared and spoke only with a select few. Surely, having selected the necessary cards, they were forced to undergo an initiation rite through bribery. Rumors spread like wildfire. This is the new political course, and the Marquis decided with all his might to seize this chance. Loria said with a smile that they could finally act seriously. Even on the 4th day of the banquet, MC was not deprived of attention. He thought that for some reason the trophies were piling up one after another. Most likely, they were courting him because of false rumors about his connection with Altia and Janonia. For now, he will simply take their gifts. They will not take them back, will they? He grinned slyly, and suddenly Evan put his hand on his shoulder and called out, which startled him. Evan asked why he was so surprised. He caught his breath and told him that he was just thinking for a second. After that, they moved to a quieter place to talk, and Evan told him about the disturbing news. A god had descended in the north. Evan said that they said Caliburn was currently in trouble. According to ancient texts, it is assumed that the meaty monsters are connected with the outer gods. He asked, what about the information he requested? He answered him that the man he was looking for was in that village north of Ashudelon. He remarked that this was excellent. They would stop there on the way. They needed to go to Caliburn. Evan asked in surprise, so suddenly, why did they need to go there? Was he really going north? He answered that he would explain everything on the way and ordered him to prepare for departure immediately. Evan left, and he clutched his head and sighed heavily. He so hoped it wouldn't come to this. Catastrophic entities on the level of the 5 great sins, outer gods. It was impossible to predict which outer god would appear and when the divine descent would occur. So he tried to gather information and act proactively, but he didn't expect it to happen so soon. Since he had seen hundreds of possible scenarios in the game, the ending was obvious. The allied kingdoms would collapse and then disappear altogether, waging senseless wars on a land defiled by otherworldly forces, and then his life would be destroyed in an instant. He had come up with a plan for this, but after the descent, the outer god needed several months to stabilize before awakening as a living deity. While they were in the form of heroic spirits and couldn't use their full power, targeting them was the best option. He wrote the letter and thought that there were no guarantees, but he had to try. It was the only way. He sealed it and wondered what that child would like. A week later, the knight brought Deos a letter, and when he saw who it was from, he was very surprised. He ordered his deputy to tell everyone that the departure to the north was delayed for 2 weeks. By this time, Alan reached Pakara, a village north of Ashutelon. He looked at the cheerful boy in front of him and thought that he did not expect to find him so easily. The boy spread his arms out to the sides, greeting him, and he thought that he really stood out. He is one of the main game characters in Psychedelia 11. Apparently, the protagonist remains the protagonist everywhere. He looks very much like himself in the game. He is a boy, right? He is too handsome. He leaned towards him and asked if he knew who he was. He replied that he was just glad to meet a new person. His name is Elivon. MC thought that no matter how different this world is from the game, the protagonist remains the protagonist. Sooner or later, he will become famous and powerful. He noticed that he was a very bright boy, and a thought flashed through his mind that it was strange to be standing in front of the character he had played before. He gave him a bag of coins, and he took out a coin from it and asked in surprise, "Is it gold?" Alan waved his hand at Evan, and he immediately opened a case with potions in front of the boy, then showed him several outfits, and then the rest of the gifts. MC said that they were all for him, and the boy, looking at that huge pile of gifts, was very confused. He asked why he was suddenly giving him all this. He thought that he brought everything that was useful for the hero's development at the early stage, and told him that it was an investment, because in the future he would become a very important person. In his mind, he asked him to grow up quickly, so that he could deal with problems like the outer gods for him. After that, he headed back to the carriage, thinking that he had been generous enough with him. He certainly earned his trust, right? He realized he'd almost forgotten to introduce himself and turned to the boy, stating his name. It was the name of the patron he should be grateful to when he achieved success. Elivon ran up to the carriage and thanked him, then cheerfully waved goodbye and said he would definitely remember his name. Watching him see him off, Alan wondered if he'd always had such a cheerful personality. The game's genre was dark fantasy. He hadn't thought he'd be so cheerful. Evan asked if it was okay to leave without even talking to him properly. He replied that the boy was smart and would understand everything. He thought his life was in danger now. He had no time to build relationships. If he didn't understand, he'd invested in the future. Evan looked at Elivon and said that, in any case, the boy's talent was simply incredible. His mana is thick and seething, and despite his simple clothes, he was clearly wearing artifacts. MC said he felt the mana too. According to the game's plot, he's supposed to be an ordinary guy before the adventure begins. Perhaps this is another unexpected butterfly effect that distinguishes this world from the game, especially considering he's the main character. However, he just needs to stick to the easy life plan. The stronger he is, the better. His investment will pay off. After all, Elivon is one of the few good guys in this dark fantasy world, so there's nothing to worry about. And then something suddenly worried him. He asked Evan if he thought they would meet Deos. He'd never been to the orphanage because he was afraid, but who would have thought things would turn out like this? Evan told him he was sure it would happen, and seeing how nervous his lord was, he added the word probably. 10 days later, they arrived in the capital of Caliburn, Kirtham. Right now, they were standing at the northern gate of the city, waiting their turn to enter. Evan sighed heavily and said he was so exhausted, and Alan remarked that a long journey always tires. Evan said that if it weren't for that strange labyrinth at the end, he would have been more cheerful. Before arriving in the capital, they had traveled so many places in search of artifacts, in preparation for the battle with the outer god. And Alan had also collected gifts for Deos. He was like a father who wanted to give his son the best. Evan peered out of the carriage, noting that their turn would soon be up, then got out and told the Count that the entry check would be over as soon as their identities were confirmed. After that, MC sprawled back in his seat as much as he could and said it was such a relief. Everything would be easy now. Evan peered into the carriage and said there was a problem. The guards told them to move aside, and Alan asked what was going on. Evan said that they confirmed the identities, but they didn't like something. MC got out of the carriage and the guard asked, "Isn't this Count Palladio?" He was Viren, the fourth swordsman, the personal apprentice of the swordmaster Fiola. Alan thought, so what? This idiot was already pissing him off. He asked, why did he come with the knights? What's the problem? He said he'd heard a rumor that his friend from the kingdom of Asura had some score to settle with him. MC said he was hearing about it for the first time, and at that moment he remembered Carmine was from Asura. Viron smirked and said that it seemed he'd managed to seriously annoy his friend. Carmine had recently contacted him and, in a rage, told him about Palladio. He'd embarrassed him in front of everyone. He'd heard that idiot was heading to Caliburn. Let him beat him up so badly he'd be crippled. He needs more abyssal essences to level up, right? Now Viron said that he received some goods from him, so he should at least pretend that he cared. The knights surrounded them. Evan drew his sword, preparing to defend himself, and Alon thought that he ran away after running into him. Viron said that if he gave him everything of value from the carriage, he would let him go. After which he jabbed the tip into his chest and added that he was asked for it. He smirked and thought that he had nothing to lose. This guy is from the kingdom of Asteria, which no one in the Alliance takes into account, and he has no connections in Caliburn. He already made inquiries. MC was very angry and thought that idiots are drawn to each other. He used magic, and Viron immediately pounced on him, thinking that if anything goes wrong, his master will sort it out. Suddenly, someone grabbed him by the neck and lifted him off the ground, causing him to kick. Wheezing from lack of air, he asked who it was, and Deos asked in rage, what was he doing? He dared to touch his benefactor? MC stared at him in surprise. Unfortunately for Viron, he didn't know something. He didn't know that Count Palateo was Deos Macallion's benefactor, that he became a hero and received the nickname Swordless and the title of Swordmaster, and Deos would not tolerate such disrespect towards him. He threw the knight to the ground, then kicked him in the head, grabbed him by the hair, and he asked him to stop, but he didn't care. Viron exclaimed that he had no right to do this to him, and Deos, raising a menacing glare at the others, said that if anyone moved even an inch, they would be in trouble. They shuddered in fear. He kicked the knight in the chest, throwing him aside, and he hit his back against a tree trunk. Alon was shocked. He realized that this knight was Deus. At this time, he ran up to his attacker and told him to be grateful for the circumstances, that he could not finish him off right now. Just as Viren had time to more or less come to his senses, another blow followed right to the head. But Deus did not stop there. He began to beat him from all sides, not even letting him move. And Evan noted that he hit him well, and MC thought, did he just call him his benefactor? He was so touched, and did not pay attention at all to how brutally he was beating him. He thought he would be grateful for raising him, but he decided that he had forgotten him, and would not even say hello, because he did not receive a single letter from him. He has a feeling that all his efforts in raising him paid off. Meanwhile, Deus pinned the knight to a tree, and Alan watched him with a proud smile, thinking about how good he'd grown. He'd become a real beauty. He was very pleased and said he was proud to have raised his son well, and Evan asked, he understands that his son is beating up a man, right? MC ignored him, wiping away tears of joy. He was a son, after all, who stood up for his father, who was wronged in a foreign land. Deus pinned the knight to the ground, making him cough up blood, and he wondered why his son was so cute. His mind finally returned. He looked at the pile of blood and the beaten boy, wondering if this was too much. Having finished with him, Deus headed toward his benefactor. And then he remembered that he was destined to become one of the 5 deadly sins. He was frightened by his son's approach, but contrary to all expectations, Deus bowed low to him, then looked up at him with a smile and said that he would escort him. The knights were shocked by this change of mood. Meanwhile, in the north, Delman, Caliburn's 3rd swordsman and captain of the Knightly Order of the Scarlet Flame, marked the captured territory with his banner, and shouted that one of the 8 great clans had been destroyed, a victory for the Order of the Scarlet Flame. The knights joyfully raised their swords, celebrating their victory, and then decided to return to base to regroup. But Delman didn't seem particularly pleased. He closed his eyes and thought that with such achievements, he would not yield to someone who had just become a swordmaster, even if he had to use dirty tricks that no one would know about. Caliburn and the barbarians had long adhered to the rules of war, respecting each other's honor, but he deceived Kirkhan and dealt with him when he emerged alone, along with a detachment of scouts. In this spirit, he successfully exterminated the entire clan. Since this idiot had killed Kurga of the Snowfields, he needed a clear outcome from the expedition. Kirkhan's body had disappeared during the battle. The barbarians had likely hidden it. Even if he were still alive, he should have died of poison by now. In any case, everything would be over as soon as he returned to Caliburn and reported this achievement. In high spirits, they headed to the base, but something terrible awaited them there. The forward base was destroyed, the knights were killed, and in the midst of this bloody carnage stood Kirkhan, who had come to take revenge on Delman. The knight immediately lit his sword with flame and wondered what that aura was. Kirkhan was definitely supposed to die. And then the barbarian spoke not in his own voice, but that of his deity. Why had they desecrated the great and sacred duel of honor? Delman felt the terror that devoured even a superhuman capable of taking hundreds of lives with a single sword strike. Delman whispered fearfully that he was not Kirkhan. Who was he? The barbarian leaped toward him and ordered him to fight, and he responded by striking him with his sword, hurling a powerful stream of flame at him, and asked if it wasn't his own fault for believing the word duel on the battlefield. The barbarian dodged his attack and said he had climbed too high for a human. This was his last chance. Let him fight him. The captain ordered his knights to prepare for battle, and the god called him a mortal without honor. He would not grant such a barbarian an honorable death. He waved his fingers, and the bodies of the dead knights began to move. They began to rise, screaming that they were in pain, that they wanted to die. Delman and the others were horrified by this sight, and the deity took advantage of this and cut off his arm. The knight screamed in pain. Then the god struck the ground, throwing the knights into the air. He then kicked them several times, killing them in midair. The next blow landed on Delman. The barbarian pierced his chest, and he asked, "Who is he?" He pulled his hand out of him, and he fell onto the snow and immediately began writhing in pain, begging him to kill him. The god looked at his hand and said that he welcomed all the savages of this place, created from the dead, who were denied death in the bloody Colosseum. He, the god of all barbarians, Altertus, the father of duels, personally wishes to grant them an honorable death. Let them prove that they are not savages through dueling. At this time, the crippled Viren was led away and Deos offered to escort him to Alon. The knights were shocked that Swordless himself bowed his head. In Caliburn, the ambitions of Deus Macallion, Swordless, are as high as the heavens. He wasn't punished for beating up the second prince who was harassing his sister. He was never polite to anyone except the king. That's why it's so shocking that he bowed his head to a count from a foreign country. For Swordless to bow his head, who is this Count of Palatio? Deus had kindly provided his benefactor with his luxurious carriage, and he thought it would attract a lot of attention. Evan told him to go ahead and he would follow the carriage. Soon the carriage arrived at a huge mansion and MC thought, does that mean Deus lives here? Deus led him inside, and as they walked down the corridor in complete silence, Alan thought that this silence was suffocating him. His act was very touching, but maybe he was uncomfortable with it. He would get straight to the point. That was the best way to show respect. They entered the reception area and MC called out to him, saying that he had a favor to ask of him. That was the reason he was here. Deus looked at him in surprise and clarified, did he say a request? He confirmed it, and he mentally noted that it was a request, not an order. Alon asked if that was strange. He was already thinking that he considered him completely shameless, and Deus said that they would continue when they sat down. He sat him down on a chair, the most honorable place, and he himself sat on the sofa, which embarrassed him a little, but in fact, he liked it. He treated him like a father. He said that he had 2 requests of him. He understood that this might be a burden, but he needed to go north. Could he accompany him? He didn't even listen to the end and happily agreed, which took MC by surprise and thought, so quickly? Deus said that he was just getting ready for an expedition to the north, and he realized that it wasn't because of him that he agreed so quickly. Now the request is more difficult. He asked if he could borrow the madman's ring from the Caliburn treasury. Meanwhile, the knight arrived to the vice captain, informing him that he had returned from a mission. He praised him, thinking that he shouldn't have been particularly worried, since the captain himself had taken on the escort. Hearing this, Shelley said that her brother must have a very important guest, and the vice captain laughed. Some time ago, the captain had told him that he would shift his plans in the north by 2 weeks, and when he asked about the reason, Deus said with a smile that his benefactor would soon be here. Now, the vice captain thought for a moment and said that he had never seen him like this. Count Palladio from the kingdom of Asteria had arrived. Upon hearing his name, she was greatly surprised. Alan, meanwhile, asked Deus about the ring and thought that it was an unreasonable request that would put him in debt to the royal family. But the madman's ring was very important for this plan. Deus lowered his head, thinking about this, and when he was about to answer him in the affirmative, Evan entered the reception room. Since Deus was sitting with a rather gloomy expression, MC sighed with relief and thought that he had come just in time. First, he needed to defuse the situation. He would like his gifts, right? He told Evan with a meaningful look that he was just in time, and Evan, understanding his intentions, said that he would bring everything now. After a while, he completely filled the table with gifts, and Alon told Deus that he had prepared all of this for him. He deliberately took what, judging by rumors, was currently popular. He was very pleased with himself and thought that this is how to set the atmosphere. He placed a decoration on the table and hoped that he liked it. He chose it after much deliberation, but the expected reaction did not follow. Deus only briefly thanked him, and he asked if he was going to open the gifts. He turned away from him awkwardly and told him that it would be rude, so he would open them when he was alone. The gift plan failed. MC thought he didn't like it, or maybe he was really trying to show respect. He remembered how he had stood up for him and calmed down. After that, he awkwardly said that if his request caused him inconvenience, he could compensate for it. Deus didn't let him finish and stated that he would bring the ring right now, and he asked if he hadn't heard what he said about the location of it. Deos nodded and said that it was in the royal treasury, and he asked in confusion, wouldn't that be so difficult? He told him that it usually takes a week, but he fell silent, thinking it over, and then said that dealing with the king would be the most tedious part, but he only needed to knock out about 50 people. Alon mentally noted that he would feel great, but when he asked with a very serious expression whether he should start right now, he realized he was not joking. He said that he should not go that far, and Days said that he understood everything. He would get the ring as quickly as he could. MC wondered if he was trying to give it to him at any cost. He was grateful that he cared about him, but wasn't that too much? They left the reception area, and a cheerful Shelley ran up to them. Evan waved and said that they hadn't seen each other in a long time. She called him her dear friend, and then they held hands and began to rejoice at each other. Alon immediately understood who she was. She was Deos's younger sister, whom he ordered Evan to save. In the game, they only briefly showed her death. In real life, she looks exactly like Deos. He was apparently jealous of his sister and pushed her away from Evan, saying that this man was not her friend, but Mr. Evan was speechless, and MC thought that he knew Deos carried a sense of loss and emptiness because of his family. But this was too much. It seemed that he cherished her more than he expected. Deos fenced his sister off from Evan and said that he shouldn't talk to her, and he indignantly said that he was just trying to say hello to her. At that moment, Alon realized why he was so kind to him. It was because he saved Shelley. He was so focused on preventing him from becoming a sin that he didn't even realize. He scratched the back of his head with a satisfied look and wondered if he was really going to help him in everything now. Maybe he was dreaming too much, but it was unlikely that he would refuse him. Shelley distracted him from his thoughts, asking if he was the Count of Palladio. He confirmed this, and she said that she heard that he ordered her friend Evan to save her, and Deos told her to call him Mr. again. MC responded that he just did what he had to, and added in his mind that it was all because if she died, her brother would become a killing machine. He even made sure that the two of them met at the best moment. Shelley took her brother's hand and bowed to the Count, thanking him for everything. Although Alan's intentions were different, receiving gratitude from someone was very pleasant for him, and so he ended up staying at Deos's mansion for some time. Only a day had passed, and he had already brought him the ring, and he asked how he was able to get it so quickly. At that moment, Evan burst into his room and excitedly said that he just heard something very strange. He came closer to him and whispered that Deos was causing a commotion in the palace, demanding the ring. The second prince even received a couple of slaps from him, and MC was shocked by this news. And so, after 3 days of preparation, he set out on a northern expedition with the Knights of the Solar Eclipse. 2 weeks later, terrible news poured in from a forward outpost post on the northern border of Caliburn. The death of the captain of the Knights of the Scarlet Flame, a wounded swordsman, and a barbarian leading an army of the dead. The knights called a meeting and discussed retreat. The Viscount exclaimed in rage, "Are they suggesting they turn around?" The man said he had seen it himself. The soldiers were seriously wounded. The first swordsman had gone into seclusion, so they had no chance of winning against them. Deos clapped his hands, ending the argument, and everyone fell silent. Fiola, Caliburn's fourth swordsman and captain of the Knights of the Order of Preservation, said that everyone's opinion was important, but they would continue when they calmed down. After that, he and Deos left the tent, and one of them asked, "So the outer god is clearing their bases with his undead?" The third swordsman, Delman, died at the eastern base. The second swordsman, Kiriana, was seriously wounded at the western base. Deos noted that these terrible visions were starting to reach them even here, and Fiola agreed with him. They were consumed by ominous mana, a strange redness. It was a chilling flow of mana, visible only to those who had reached this level and opened their eyes to it. He said that the ominous aura continued to attract his gaze. Perhaps retreat really was the best option. Deos saw smoke coming from behind the tent and immediately went there. Alon was there, frying sweet potatoes and practicing spells at the same time. Deos wondered, where did he even get this idea? A girl's irritated voice was heard from the side. Venia called the knights idiots and exclaimed that she had already said that the treatment was finished, and there was nothing more she could do. She's only here to research the barbarian ritual. The man asked, aren't people more important than research? Let her do it just once. Deus wondered if the Knightly Order of the Silver Shadow, swordswoman Kiriana, and the deputy master of the Blue Magic Tower were here. Venia headed in his direction, irritably telling the wounded that all they could do now was watch. She glanced at Deus and angrily ordered him out of the way. And then her expression changed in an instant when she saw Alon looking at her with a creepy gaze. He waved at her and said that he had been told she would come. After all, it was true. She couldn't just leave and had to fry potatoes with him. Trembling and stuttering with fear, she said that she didn't have any supplies of the medicine he asked for. The manufacturing process was terribly long, and she was very busy right now, so she couldn't do anything. He, as coldly as always, said that he had high hopes for her, but he understood everything. He thought he was probably asking too much, and the girl was terrified by his tone and exclaimed that she could definitely do anything. His mood lifted slightly, and he said that they had been tight with finances lately, so the payment might be a little delayed. She waved her hands excitedly and said that it was her debt, 1 gold coin would be enough. He did not refuse such a generous offer, and she smiled broadly, and her subordinates, who had just approached them, practically dropped everything from their hands in surprise. They had never seen her smile, and they were shocked, and he had just knocked the price down by a couple of 100 gold coins. Unable to talk to him anymore, Phinia quickly ran away, saying that she would get down to business right away, and her subordinates turned admiring glances to the Count and thought it was simply amazing. Soon the meeting was called again, but as soon as they sat down, Fiola jumped up from his chair, sensing an ominous aura. Deus stood up after him and grabbed his sword, announcing that they were under attack. An army of the undead began to approach the camp, and the knights immediately rushed to the attack, already suffering their first losses. Phinia intervened, casting a spell that sent ice spikes piercing the enemy's bodies before exploding. Meanwhile, Deus quickly decimated the enemy with his sword, then looked up and declared that they were approaching. Phinia raised her head and saw despair radiating overwhelming power. Lightning flashed, and a god descended from the sky, causing a shockwave. Alturtus declared this to be simply barbaric, not even thinking of atoning for the sins of those who had lost their honor. Fiola immediately charged, rushing toward him at high speed and slashing his sword into his chest, but it couldn't even wound him. His sword of ultimate speed had no effect. Alturtus waved his hand, knocking him aside, and declared that he who had abandoned honor, who had rejected the nobility of his soul, would not be granted an honorable death. Fiola's headless body fell nearby, and the knights were horrified by the sight and by the fact that he had died so simply. MC approached Alturtus and greeted him respectfully, saying that in accordance with Alturtus's oath, in order to fulfill the Great Covenant, he demanded a duel of Babylon. The god chuckled, lightning flashed in the sky, and he noted that he knew the oath of their era. It was unexpected, but he welcomed it. With a snap of his fingers, the dead stopped attacking and began to form a circle. The blood that poured from them created the arena's barriers, and the god told Elon that this was a bloody Colosseum, where outsiders were not allowed. He, Alturtus, accepted the sacred duel of Babylon under the shadow of a great vow. MC immediately felt a terrible pressure from it and realized he had miscalculated. He hadn't thought that he was already so close to becoming a living god. The outer gods grow stronger the closer they get to descent. In their complete form, their power is equal to that of the 5 deadly sins. If he hadn't drunk the potion of exclusivity, he would already be unconscious. So this was his last chance before he fully awakened. The duel began. By the way, the Great Duel of Babylon in the Forgotten Era of the Gods is turn-based. Rule 1. The one challenged strikes first. Seeing the god attack, the knights scattered, surprised that the count didn't move. Rule 2. The defender is forbidden to move during their turn, and outside of it, they are forbidden to change position. Seeing him not moving, Alturtus exclaimed contentedly that this was excellent. He knew what honor was. Rule 3. Turns are divided into attack and defense. Roles alternate each round. Alon is on defense. It's his turn now. He took out a potion and cast a spell, thinking that a normal block against such an attack is pointless. Fixation, compaction, strengthening, deepening. All this is to improve defense. He will have to invest all the mana available today to survive just one attack. Alturtus attacked him, throwing a huge ball of energy at him. It approached him in an instant and struck with a loud sound, extending beyond the Colosseum. An explosion occurred, sparks from protective magic scattered around, and when everything died down, the sky finally cleared, and the sun's rays illuminated the trail left by such a powerful blow. Seeing a dark silhouette in clouds of smoke, everyone froze, wondering if he had survived. MC survived. The artifact protected him. Having fulfilled its purpose, the artifact evaporated, and Alon glanced at the potion. Before the fight, Phinia gave him a potion of exceptionality and a potion of remithion, which dulls severe pain. The potion's effect was powerful. Without it, he would not be able to stand now, and as he thought, there wasn't a scratch on the vial of healing potion. He poured the potion on himself. It wouldn't completely heal him, but it would help him recover. After all, it was a top-quality potion. Now that the pride conditions were met, he took out the ring and activated the restriction. It was finally his turn to attack, the one he'd been waiting for. The boss battle with Alturtus is turn-based and follows special rules. To limit the external god's actions to these rules, he deliberately drew him into a duel. Thanks to the pendant of reincarnation and the healing potion, he barely survived his blow. The condition for activating the madman's ring is being on the brink of death. After activating, he met with the deity of this artifact and set restrictions. Since Alturtus considers duels sacred, he will neither defend nor interrupt it. In the game, he would simply take the first attack. Buffs reduce the time limit, rather than wasting a turn. But here, unlike in the game, there are no time limits. The first restriction: if magic is used in the lands of permafrost, it will distort the laws of this world. He braced himself, and 2 deities looked at him at once. Refraction, the creation of sparks. Second limitation: if magic is used on the threshold of death, it will distort the laws of this world. Focus and condensation. The sparks were directed at Alturtus in a smooth and thick stream. Death, empowering the stream. Third limitation: if magic is used against a god, it will distort the laws of this world. The last phrase: a silent front in the stream of magic struck, destroying everything in its path. Fourth limitation: if magic is used against Alturtus, the great god of duels, it will distort the laws of the world. Alturtus spread his arms, smiling as he met his blow, and then a powerful explosion occurred. MC hoped for success, so that he would disappear with the first blow. Outer gods do not disappear simply because of the loss of a body part, even if that part is the heart. His blow pierced the god, but did not kill him. Alturtus smiled and said that he was strong, which paralyzed Alon with shock and horror. The last blow, which had consumed all his accumulated mana, had failed. Alturtus chuckled and said, he understood? He carried this will within himself. Just think, he already had a class. MC stared at him in surprise, wondering what was going on. Alturtus crouched, his body began to disappear, and he called him a noble warrior with a smile, saying that it had been a wonderful duel. Alon had no idea what was happening. Why was he disappearing? Alturtus said that now he was curious to see how things would play out between the black and blue. He took off his belt and said that he had lost the duel, so he was giving it to him along with the power. He headed back to the sky and said as a last word that he, the one who remembered the hand seals and secrets of the great forgotten god, would carry their will. When the usurpers free themselves from their shackles and crawl out, let him call his name. Not a nickname steeped in lies, but his true name, the god of chaos. Having said these words, he disappeared. After that, the expedition began collecting the dead, who had regained their peace, and preparations began for the return to Caliburn. MC called Fenia into his carriage for a talk. He wanted to ask her a question, and she excitedly exclaimed that she remembered he was a mage of the second circle. He corrected her. He was a mage of the third circle, and she nervously said that she was mistaken. He asked if she by any chance knew what the expression black and blue meant. Avoiding his gaze, she nervously began to swear to him that she hadn't seen anything, and he decided not to ask her anything else. After that, she ran out of the carriage, thanking him for letting her go, and he thought that he hadn't told her to leave. When he is thanked for nothing, he feels like a cruel villain pulling the strings. After that, he leaned back tiredly in his seat and thought about why the outer god disappeared after the failed attack. He had so many questions about what he said. He looked at the thing he gave him. He had seen it in the game before. It was the Belt of the Forgotten, an accessory that can be obtained after defeating Alturtus. It doubles the owner's attack damage, but also doubles the damage taken. On the inside of the belt was written, "He who has the will must go to Kahala, the city of the ancient god." Alan saw this phrase for the first time and wondered if he would recognize anything when he arrived in Kahala. Deos looked into the carriage and said discontentedly that this girl dared to leave without even saying goodbye to him properly. Should he kill her? He nervously said that it was unnecessary and wondered if he was imagining it or if he had become even more reckless. 2 weeks later, the capital of Caliburn. After Deos reported the results of the cleansing to the king, the northern expedition concluded. Alan also safely returned the madman's ring to the treasury. It was time to leave. MC said goodbye to Deos and looked over the 3 carriages that would be traveling with him. He also received a bunch of gifts from King Caliburn. He literally invested all his money in saving his own life. So this is just great. Deos hesitantly called out to him and asked if he thought he could also become as strong as him. His question stunned Alon, and the youngest knight asked him about it. He wondered what that even meant. Maybe his magic looked cool? Perhaps it could be impressive. Even before the indulgence of the gods fused with the 5 deadly sins, children possessed rather unique abilities. Since Deos is very talented in swordsmanship, it is only a matter of time before he becomes as strong as he desires. He told him that with enough effort, he could become stronger, and then he would achieve what he desired. He asked in surprise, did he really think so? He confirmed it and silently added that it was all because he had a blessed talent and he wished for the same. He turned to the carriage and finally told him not to worry so much, but he still had one question. Why was he asking him for favors instead of simply giving orders? MC turned to him and asked, who in their right mind would order their family around? Deos looked surprised. Then his benefactor climbed into the carriage and they set off. Alan was very upset by his last question. He lowered his head and, wiping away his tears, thought, did he think all this time that he had some ulterior motive for sponsoring him? He sponsored him with his own money, purely out of good intentions, and it didn't matter that initially he wanted to stop the awakening of the 5 deadly sins. Now he understands why they say being a parent is a thankless job. Night fell. Deos returned to his reception room and sorted through all of his gifts. He followed him to repay his kindness, but ended up receiving even more from him. An idea occurred to him. He folded his fingers like Alon and extended his hand, uttering the phrase, silent front. But unlike his benefactor, he was unsuccessful. He waved his hand a few times and felt slightly embarrassed, thinking that he wished he had the same talent for magic as him. After that, he glanced at his gifts and thought, so they are family? After a long journey, MC finally reached his beloved home. He went into the office and said that 3 whole months had passed. He was so tired, he needed to lie down first. But there, on the desk, a pile of documents was waiting for him. greeting him with open arms. He immediately slammed the door and ran away, thinking this was his bedroom. But his conscience did not allow him to rest. He returned to the office and decided to first sort out this pile of papers and then rest. This is the life of a Korean clerk, apparently. He will not have the opportunity to rest peacefully, like a true aristocrat, anytime soon. After that, he took a whole week off as a reward for himself. Peace and prosperity, that is true happiness. Now he stretched out on the couch and, out of boredom, created a snowflake. He'd been resting for a whole week, but now he felt uneasy. That was his Korean clerk instinct. First, he decided to sort out the pile of terms Alturtus had left him. Black and blue, god of chaos, and so on. He called him the one who remembers the hand seals and secrets of the great forgotten god. He'd heard of hand seals and secrets before, but he knew nothing else. God of chaos, huh? Why did Alturtus's true name sound like the name of an Eastern god? Besides, he'd never seen an outer god disappear like that. Why did they even appear? How troublesome. Now that it's started, there's a chance other outer gods will show up too. But at least they give warning before they descend, unlike the 5 deadly sins. He'd like to go to Kahala right now, but he couldn't get there even if he knew the location. He took out the notebook he kept in case he forgot something and looked through his notes. Kahala is a ruin, a secret dungeon in Koloni. It explained that it was discovered 3 years before the protagonist left the village. 3 years before the main story, already this year. Since researchers haven't found it yet, going there now would only get him into trouble. Evan pulled him out of his thoughts. He hugged his shoulders and noted how cool it was in there. Was this his magic? He confirmed it and thought it was now useful. It seemed his research during his vacation had borne fruit. Evan said he had come to report that a hidden city had been discovered in Kolani. Fortune smiled on Alon again. That evening, Utah summoned all the children. The semi-annual Blue Moon meeting takes place through a crystal ball. It usually lasts no more than 10 minutes. But this time, it was different. Solen said they said the Great Moon had visited Caliburn. What was it like to see it in person? Deos, who was usually taciturn, decided to tell them everything in detail. Radon was surprised, and Solen exclaimed that she couldn't believe he was talking. He started from the very beginning, and after 50 minutes, the story finally reached the fight. When everyone was trembling with fear and despair, the Great Moon calmly stepped forward. He thinks he foresaw everything and prepared his magic in advance. Although, how did he even know about the duel? He really does know everything in the world. Everyone except Utaya was already tired of listening to him. Solen asked him to stop, but he said that the most important thing was just beginning. No one could have foreseen this fatal blow, but the Great Moon managed it. It was simply amazing. And just then, he began to prepare his real attack. They could no longer listen to him. Solen mentally asked Utaya to stop him, but she, on the contrary, supported him, and she clutched her head, realizing that it was all over. 2 hours later, Deos finally finished. He awkwardly coughed into his fist and apologized to them for babbling. Now they'll see each other in 6 months. Utaya said with a smile that she hadn't had this much fun in a long time, after which the 2 of them passed out, and the other 3 remained because they fell asleep. That day, the semi-annual Blue Moon meeting broke their record for duration, about 3 hours. Time passed, MC entered the reception room, and seeing that the entire room was filled with gifts, asked, "What are these?" Evan began examining everything, picked up something, and said with surprise that it was an artifact from the lower floors of the labyrinth. One could buy an entire mansion with it. Alon picked up a golden cup and said that it was from aristocrats he had never even heard of. There was also a mountain of letters. It seemed that rumors of his deeds in the north had already spread. He wondered if so many gifts were due to just one connection. As a former office slave, he learned one truth: if they give, take them silently. A week later, another batch of gifts arrived, and MC found this strange. Could acquaintance with a knight really bring so many benefits? Deos is truly a good son. He'll forget those bitter times when he didn't write him letters. But even after a month, the gifts still weren't ending, and he decided to return some of these exorbitant gifts, otherwise it was becoming a burden. At the beginning of summer, when the flow of gifts began to dry up, Alon went to the capital of the kingdom of Asteria, Teria, for the Grand Council. After getting off the carriage, he quickly walked toward the building. He couldn't believe he was late for his first council meeting. If he was late, the entire hall would only be looking at him. Evan wished him luck and thought with a smile that he'd never seen him walk like that. He must be in a hurry. He saw other aristocrats following Alon and wondered if they were lining up behind the count. MC reached the hall, cautiously peered inside, and to his happiness, no one was inside, meaning he wasn't late. He looked around the room and thought that the seats on the left were for the royalists, and on the right were for the aristocratic faction. He had studied everything in advance, so the seats in the center were for the neutrals. He decided to sit in the back row and then saw the aristocrats staring at him terrifyingly and thought, weren't they all standing outside? Maybe they were angry that he sat at the very end? Then he would move to the middle. He wanted to sit down, but the aristocrats followed him and silently glared at him, which made him uneasy. In the end, they drove him to the very front row, and when they took the seats behind him, he thought, they put him in the front row so they wouldn't have to sit there themselves? That's quite logical. There's nothing good about sitting in the same row as the faction leaders. So the council meeting began. First, the man announced that the recently created Kalpa faction had received the right to vote. Alon had already started to get bored, and suddenly the man said that House Palladio was appointed as the faction's representative. He stared at him in surprise and wondered what kind of faction is Kalpa? Was he the only one who didn't know about it? He turned around to check the others' reactions and saw Kalia and Loria smiling at him. He was very surprised and thought, what's wrong with them? Why are they sitting together? So the alliance of Junonia and Altia turned into a faction? And this new faction is called Kalpa? He thought their alliance would soon fall apart. It was driving him crazy. The man turned to him and asked if he had anything to say as a representative of the faction. MC became nervous and thought, so he is the leader of the new shadow faction? At that time, an unknown man appeared on the battlefield between the god and the count. He examined the mark left by the blow and said with a smile that it was very interesting. What else is he capable of? Alan still didn't know how to act. To become the head of a shadow faction overnight, that's impossible. Or maybe it's possible? It sounds like the title of a novel. MC still couldn't say anything, and the man decided to move on to the next question. When the meeting ended, a feast began, where everyone did nothing but congratulate Alan on the creation of the faction. That evening, attention was focused only on him, and he continued to ponder how it had come to this. And when he came to the conclusion that he was just a figurehead, the women approached him, and Kalia asked if he was enjoying the feast. In her opinion, everything turned out perfectly. Loria agreed with her and added that it turned out exactly as the count wanted. He grabbed his head and tried to remember everything carefully. He had exchanged a few words with them several years ago. Did he have a split personality? Was his second personality doing something without his knowledge? Loria said she was glad she could repay him for saving her life, and he winced, not understanding what she was talking about. So, from the conversations he learned the following. He, Alon Palladio, ordered the alliance, then sent instructions to Lady Junonia, and thus Kalpa was born. The aristocrats presented him as the leader with gifts, thereby receiving permission to join the faction. But he swears that he ordered nothing of the sort. He tried to recall the contents of the letter of apology he sent to Junonia. He wrote there that he seemed rude, he was bad at choosing words, and in general, he had few friends. Now he understood why among the gift cards there were strange ones, where they wrote about love for him. Apparently, this misunderstanding can no longer be resolved. He knew from experience that the secret puppeteers have a very peculiar intuition. As soon as he hinted at the misunderstanding, those two would kill him. The shadow puppeteers in this game were psychopaths, especially Junonia. He needed to leave quietly when the opportunity presented itself. Loria asked what he intended to do next, and he thought he knew nothing about politics, so it would be better not to get into trouble. He said they would start with the shadow world, after which he said goodbye to them, deciding to run away before they started asking him questions. He himself didn't know anything. He approached the carriage and Evan thought something had happened, and he nervously asked, did he send the letter? He confirmed it and asked, didn't he say it was a banquet? Why was he leaving so quickly? He got into the carriage and told him not to even look back. They were going to Colony right now. Meanwhile, Loria took a glass of champagne and said that, as always, he would say what was needed and disappear. Kalia said that their territory had long been under control. A unification of the shadow world, huh? Loria remarked that it would be interesting, after which they clinked glasses, wondering what heights he would show them. Meanwhile, a suspicious man caught up with the Count's carriage. He hovered in the air and thought that killing him would be easy. But if that swordmaster interfered, there would be problems. Besides, the leader had told him to avoid unnecessary hostility. Even if the payment was high, that was the law. But this was a contract, and his leader would understand. His client turned out to be Duke Comelon. He came to listen to him on a dark night. Carmine asked if he was one of the agents, right? If so, then he should know him. The agents are a group of sword master level assassins of the United Kingdom. And this guy recognized his client. He was from a family of truth seekers. Suddenly, he ran across the room, killing his guards who were hiding in the shadows, and said that he was not hunting rats during the contract. Carmine was not afraid. On the contrary, he was glad of his strength, after which he declared that he wanted him to eliminate Count Palateo. He would not refuse the one called the tyrant Ashutalon, would he? The agent said that if he set a fair price, there would be no failure, even if the target was someone from the Rod Kingdom. The only question was whether he could afford their fee. Carmine showed him a cube filled with darkness and said he would give him 4 of them. He asked in surprise, these aren't abyssal stones but abyssal bodies themselves. Abyssal bodies are a commodity that Duke Comelon supplies to the black market in negligible quantities. Unlike abyssal stones, which only strengthen the body, they grant special power. He barely got to try this, only thanks to the leader, and he wonders how much stronger he will become if he uses what he offers. It's one of the reasons why agents became the best of the best. He disappeared, saying he would return as soon as possible, and Carmine nervously clenched his fist and asked if Palateo really thought he could live peacefully after humiliating him. That would never happen. Meanwhile, the agent approached the truth seeker, Duke Comelon, and told him everything. He was the head of the aristocracy and the kingdom of Ashutalon, the true ruler of the shadow world of the United Kingdom. After listening to him, the Duke said he had always wondered what his worthless son, who had stolen the bodies of the abyss, was up to. The agent thought that, frankly, it was tempting, but the leader strictly forbade him from becoming the Duke's enemy. The man waved his hand, saying he hadn't heard anything and should leave. The boy was delighted. He was lucky. This time he would close his eyes. He asked if he was allowed to convey his wishes to the leader. The Duke replied that an uninvited visit was also a good excuse. Let him do what he wanted. The agent left, and Shutro, the shadow ruler of the kingdom of Ashudalon, approached the Duke and asked, "So, there's no influence on the kingdom of Asteria?" He confirmed this, and they also say that a faction called Kalpa is growing around Count Palateo. The Duke remarked that if he acted personally, there would be much more trouble. Everything is going just perfectly. Currently, the agent froze in the air above the carriage. He twirled his weapon in his hands and thought that the body of the abyss would soon be in his hands. He was about to attack, but suddenly someone's precise blow took away his arm. He turned around, but was unable to see the attacker, since he was immediately struck and he fell to the ground with a crash. The blow was so strong that he could no longer move. And then the attacker approached him. It turned out to be Elivon. He smiled and told him not to waste his strength in vain. He would not be able to move anyway. He waved his index finger, an unknown force throwing it into the air, and then sauntered towards the carriage and said that he was very sorry. All this time he followed the Count, making sure that nothing threatened him, and thought that if a target was not the Count, then that guy would not have to die by his hand. He broke his weapon and disappeared. 5 days had passed since they left the council hall and headed straight to Colony. Right now, they were already in the desert, and it was so hot that MC felt like his lungs were frying. He still can't get used to the desert heat. The path also tired Evan. He said that he would like an ice crystal now. However, it costs as much as several mansions. Does he by any chance want to practice magic? For example, that spell that freezes the floor. He answered him that he told him that it was impossible yet. If he made a mistake, then trouble was inevitable. The knight said that no matter what happened, anything was better than roasting here alive. Alon looked out the window and said it was good they had joined the caravan, as they were completely unfamiliar with deserted roads. A girl riding in the next carriage asked what he was staring at. Was peeping his hobby? It was Lion Agulus, the daughter of the Red Tower's master, a 4th-rank mage, and she had an ice crystal in her carriage. MC told her that wasn't true at all. He didn't have such a hobby. Then she indignantly slammed the book she was reading shut and said he was feigning innocence, just like those idiots from the Blue Tower. Her carriage sped up, and he tiredly rubbed his neck, and Evan asked if he had seen it. She had ice crystals hanging in clusters in her carriage. Alon thought that the Red Tower's master was as furious as fire, so it was best not to touch his daughter. The Tower Master's daughter, Liana Gulis, had seen so much lies and deceit in her time that she'd come to loathe lies with a passion, especially when they were lied to by a mage. When they stopped for a rest, MC saw her fierce gaze again, and wondered if she hadn't gotten tired of staring at him all day. Her dislike for Count Palateo was purely instinctive. She thought that with his pitiful mana reserves, barely reaching rank 2, he'd supposedly stopped the outer and accomplished a great feat. Rumor has it he's the Master Knight's benefactor. He's probably just embezzling credit and spreading rumors. That same night, bandits attacked them, slaughtering all the guards and taking the girl hostage. The leader told them to hand over all the jewelry if they valued their lives. There was a tattoo on his shoulder, an emblem that indicated his affiliation with the Bloody Sand Gang, and the people were surprised that they even grabbed Lion, and she didn't even have time to do anything. Their leader pressed a blade to her neck and said that he was told that the Tower Master's daughter was coming here, that she was a truly valuable catch. The girl was so scared that she had a panic attack that made her unable to breathe, and then another mage came to her aid. He used his cold spell, thanks to which her attack passed, and it turned out to be Alon, which surprised Lion. He uttered a phrase, spreading frost further into the area, and she thought, was it a compound spell? At least 3 different elements are linked. Compound magic, in which spells with different structures must be linked in their own unique way. The more spells are linked, the more rapidly the chance of success decreases. For this, you need at least the 5th rank, so how did he manage it? The bandit leader immediately let go of her and pounced on Alon, who uttered a few more words and encased him in ice, preventing him from getting close. Then he clapped his hands, and the ice shattered along with his body. He knew that bandits had one peculiarity. As soon as the leader was dealt with, they scattered. He threateningly said that he was giving them a chance to let them leave, and they actually did. Lian was shocked. Now she realized that those rumors were true. After this, the people from the caravan immediately began to court him, offering him the best wine and meat to thank him for saving their life. MC, of course, didn't refuse the food, and when they were left alone, he thought it was good that everything had gone as planned. The main thing, after all, was that he'd reduced the penalty from the restrictions. Fierce Frost, which he developed during his vacation, simultaneously uses spatial, ice, and support magic, and it has a simple effect. It transforms the surroundings into something resembling the northern lands. Using magic on icy lands and using magic when under mortal threat reduces magical abilities. Using magic against a god also reduces magical abilities, as does using magic against the great god of duels. There are only 3 penalties left that he'll have to bear for the rest of his life. Still, 3 spells in a chain, and the duration is only a minute. That's too little, so he'll need to work on that some more. Well, Fierce Frost and the related spells worked as intended. The enhancement increased their power, so all he has to do is deal with the penalties. He was distracted from his thoughts by Lion. She awkwardly approached him and bowed, asking his forgiveness for having been mistaken about him all this time. If he didn't mind, she would like to discuss magic with him. She was a little shy, and Alan thought she had just been being picky, and now suddenly she was being polite, but he was still a magnanimous person, and so he accepted her apology, for which she was very grateful. So, on the way to Colony, their discussions continued. For him, using phrases to change the properties of magic, this was also quite useful. And finally, they arrived in the desert state of Colony, where their paths diverged. Before leaving, Leon thanked him for the lessons and asked if he, by any chance, was going to the conference. He answered her that since he did not belong to any tower, this was impossible, and then she invited him to participate on behalf of the Red Tower. She was very pleased to discuss with him. He accepted her offer, and she waved goodbye, saying that she would see him there then. He figured that there was something he needed in the tower where the conference was taking place, so everything worked out well. Evan ran up to him and told him that he had secured a carriage and that his things would be delivered too. He said that the meeting place was somewhere nearby. Immediately after that, there was a roar behind him, as if something had exploded. They both turned around and saw injured people, and Evan asked in shock. So suddenly, a golden flash flashed in front of them and hit the wall with a roar, and then several more blows were heard and a girl's laughter was heard. The golden flash beat up some people, and seeing that it had disappeared, Evan immediately drew his sword and told the Count to step back. The golden flash turned out to be faster. She jumped on the Count's back, hugged him, and greeted him joyfully. It was Solen. Evan was surprised that she was the one causing such a ruckus, and Solen, excitedly waving her arms, asked why he didn't warn her. There were plenty of thugs here, maddened by the heat, but he shouldn't worry. She had just beaten up those who were coveting his things. By this time, she had already managed to become one of the 4 Baba Yaga Colony. She tugged the Count by the hand and said that she had received his letter and was waiting for him, and that he should quickly follow her. The other warriors were surprised that the golden flash was fawning over him. Who was this person? As they walked, MC glanced at her bloody hands and wondered if those people were at least alive. She led him to her guild, where only her kin were. She joyfully ran inside, and they looked around, assessing the scale of the building. Everyone inside was very happy to see the boss, and she turned to Raug, asking if anything had happened while she was gone. He told her that everything was quiet, and then he turned to the Count and asked if he was the honored guest their boss had spoken of. He was glad to welcome him here. The boss had been waiting for him so much, sitting at the entrance to Colony every day. Solen led them into her office, happily patted the table, and jumped over it, offering them a seat. Alan remarked that she was doing an excellent job managing the guild, and she replied that because they were her family, she didn't need anyone else. Then she realized she had expressed herself incorrectly and became confused. She corrected herself, saying that she meant that she didn't need anyone else except her family, Utaya, and him. Although she and Utaya are not blood related, he touched his chin in confusion and thought they hadn't really communicated, and he was already in 3rd place? That's pretty high. And how should he start a conversation about this now? If so, the choice was obvious. He glanced meaningfully at Evan, and he immediately understood everything, after which he brought a whole mountain of gifts, which Solen was very happy about. She excitedly waved her hands and said that she would help him, and he asked, she agreed so quickly? She heard everything, right? She answered him that even if they weren't family, the main thing was that he was her benefactor. She showed him her glove and said that thanks to him, they would be able to gather her kind. He thought in surprise, so the affection boost worked this time too? It seemed there was some truth in the description. In any case, everyone is so willing to help him. It seems he's doing an excellent job of raising children. Solen immediately picked him up and said that he must be tired from the journey. She would take him to the restroom. While they were walking, she asked how he found the desert. Boring. Nothing but sand all around, right? Evan said that the journey was difficult because it was hot and they were also attacked. Hearing this, Solen immediately lost all her joy, and MC told her that they were attacked by blood sand bandits. They say this often happens to merchants. He didn't want to meet them again. Of course, she read his words as an order. That same night, she went to the blood sand bandits' hideout and dealt with everyone who was in the main hall. After that, she ran to the storeroom where the others were hiding. With a golden flash, she quickly approached them, grabbed both by the necks, and then threw them forward with all her strength. After that, she looked at the man and asked, he's the one in charge here, right? Even though he was afraid, he still took out his sword and declared that he was Kalman's younger brother under the protection of the most powerful Baba Yaga. She decided to challenge his brother. She said that they were the first to touch her benefactor, and besides, she didn't want any problems. She blew up their entire base, and the next morning, Alon received news of this as soon as he woke up, which surprised him greatly, and Solen informed him about it personally. She proudly said that they had disappeared and would no longer cause problems. She was simply a genius. He was shocked, and could only wonder what had happened that night. And then Solen clung to him and said that it was all her doing. Let him praise only her. He thought that the bloody sand had hundreds of night-level fighters. In the game, it was quite a difficult quest. He knew that the title Baba Yaga was more than just a sound, But now, he clearly understands why she was destined to become the sin of pride. The Colosseum is a popular spot in Cologne, soaked in the blood and madness of gladiators. Right now, Kalman was fighting against many enemies in the arena. He, as always, defeated them all and punched the air in victory, causing the spectators to cheer. One of the 4 Baba Yagas of Cologne, and the gladiator who has held this title the longest, was victorious again. Afterwards, he returned to his room and said that it seems there are still plenty of fools. Raoul laughed and said that he agreed with him. He couldn't believe they thought they could defeat Baba Yaga with a measly 100 men. Kalman noted that they hadn't seen each other for a long time, and the boy approached him, telling him that Solen had completely destroyed the blood sand. He told him that he knew it, and he asked if his younger brother was with them. He smirked and said that he was the one who started such rumors. He only kept it to himself because he needed someone to control the criminal underworld. Raoul sat down opposite him and smiled awkwardly, saying that he was going to use it as an excuse. But he was wrong. The man said that wasn't the point. He held back because it would be impossible to pull off through an official match between Baba Yaga title holders. He was still annoyed by that idiot getting in the way of Cologne. His brother's death and revenge were the perfect excuse the public would accept. Since he had come to him, it meant he was finally ready too. He gave him a briefcase, and inside was a gift from their father, the Seeker, the body of the abyss. Kalman said that with it he could gain power. Once they crushed his skull and absorbed the criminal underworld of Cologne, they could even make a move on the throne. Raoul said they could experiment. He wanted to see how long he could last. 2 days later, under the protection and guidance of the MC Guild, he set off for the ancient city of Kahala, and soon they arrived at the ruins. Solen escorted him to the entrance, and he entered alone with Evan. They walked through a dark cave for a while, then saw a light and followed it, emerging into a spacious cavern, the ancient city of Kahala. Evan let out a delighted sigh, and then a voice resounded in Alan's head, telling him that if he could hear his words, he should come to the tower. He separated from Evan and headed for the tower, while Alan waited below. As he was climbing, he thought that even in the game, he couldn't enter here. At the very top of the tower, there was a huge library where a certain entity was waiting for him. He said that since he could hear his voice, he at least met the minimum requirements. MC said that he came after hearing the words of the god of chaos, and he flew closer to him, asking with interest, "So, he knows his true name? Perhaps he should give him a chance." However, he lacks the power class to perceive what he can tell him. Alan said that the god of chaos said the same thing. "What does this class even mean?" He answered him that it is the standard by which the world judges him. The outer god will descend soon, let him deal with him. He asked, "What will happen then?" He answered him that then he will gain the right to talk to him. Since someone slightly better than those fools who only imitate magic has come, he can tell him something interesting. Magic is the law established by the sorcerer for this world. The magic of this world consists of a phrase, an order, and the embodiment of an essence. What is created by a phrase develops according to the order, and only when the name is spoken does it become magic. MC had never heard of such a thing, and the creature said that even if he told him, he would not understand, so he would teach him the order, with one truly correct magic. Meanwhile, Solen was waiting for him and thought that he was late. Did something happen there? Something quickly ran near the ruins. Kalman arrived. He said that he finally found them, then quickly dealt with the guild members. Even Solen did not have time to notice him in time. Hearing the sounds, she turned around and Kalman, grabbing the head of one of her kin, said that there was nothing special about them. Seeing this, she furiously pronounced his name and exclaimed, "Already beyond the walls of the Colosseum, without any rules? He dares to do this?" He laughed and asked what rules she was talking about. "She did destroy the blood sand, didn't she? His precious kin. So this is his sacred family vendetta." He ran past her, heading for her kin, and she chased after him, furiously screaming at him not to touch her family. He immediately turned to her and struck her with a blow, which she blocked, and with a smirk, said that it was expected. She was so consumed by rage that she didn't notice how Raoul snuck up behind her and pierced her body with a blade, saying that he told her so. She was easy to read. She looked at him and asked in disbelief, "Is this betrayal? It isn't, is it?" Solen had an incredibly deep affection for her kin, treated them well, called them family. After all, the happiness she yearned for was the times when the descendants of the Golden Mane tribe all lived together. Ever since leaving the orphanage, she'd been obsessively repeating her desire to take revenge on the Black Dragon who took everything, to gather her kin and restore their former happiness. The Golden Mane tribe were kings among the beastmen, but alas, not everyone shared these feelings. She quickly pulled away from Raoul, asking why he'd done it, and he said he was tired of playing family. Then Kalman pounced, telling him not to waste time and to kill her immediately. Before the blow landed, she managed to run away, her opponent shouting that she was dodging like a dirty rat. He prepared another blow with a smile. So confident was he, after all, he'd become many times stronger thanks to his abyssal body. Solen, too, hadn't stood idle and prepared herself, and then they rushed toward each other and collided, causing a loud crash. Then Raoul attacked her from the side with black smoke obtained from the body of the abyss, and laughed loudly, saying that she was finished. Luckily, she was able to dodge, and he immediately chased after her, saying that they would see how much longer she could last. They both attacked her, pressing her, and she did nothing but dodge and block blows. At one point, the two drove her to a cliff. She dodged Raulg's blow and attacked Kalman, throwing him against the cliff. Raulg stepped aside, realizing that he would be no match for her in battle, and Kalman recovered from the blow and got up. At that very moment, Alon and Evan were just emerging from the ruins. He glanced at them and thought, didn't she call him a benefactor? He rushed towards him, smiling, saying that he needed just the right person. Everything worked out very well. Before killing him, he would try to use him as a hostage. At this time, Solen attacked Raulg, but suddenly froze in place, not understanding how it happened. Raulg jumped away from her and laughed, saying that it seemed like the poison finally worked. The blade he wounded her with was laced with Kamanasa's poison. She definitely won't be able to move for an hour. By the way, she asked him the reason. Does she really think her relatives gathered around her just for a childish game of family? Of course, they were all for the power that the essence of the Golden Mane tribe gives. It was just that she had the right of ownership and authority. She got it by accident and swung it with exorbitant power. Does she even know how pathetic it looked? She said that maybe that was true. But still, even if at first everyone gathered for power, the time spent together was real, and they became a family, just like before. He chuckled and asked, has she still not woken up from her dreams? Let her admire for herself how much she is hated. He waved his hand, giving the signal, and other guild members appeared behind him, ready to attack her. She was shocked. She couldn't even imagine that the others were traitors too. Raoul pulled out his sword from the black smoke and said that the essence should remain with the one who is worthy of it, and he would accept her gift with gratitude. But before he could strike, a powerful frost spell struck next to him. He turned around in shock and saw Kalman with a mortal wound, and the other two. Evan pulled out his sword, approached him with lightning speed and finished him off, and Raoul retreated to his own people, nervously wondering, what the hell is this? He felt a terrifying energy emanating from the deities who followed Alon. He glanced at it and thought, this black smoke is magical power. Did he use the Abyss Body? But how? The Abyss Body appears in the middle of the game's story. Do you want to become a god? Anyone of the proper rank who absorbs this will gain divine power. Because of the vague description, only speculation surrounded it. So the guild members betrayed Solen. He poured a potion on her head and said it was the ultimate healing elixir, so she would soon be able to move again. And she shouldn't worry, only those scoundrels had betrayed her. But she was still very upset and hopefully asked, is this true? He answered that it was true. The guild he saw was happy. She looked up at him, then pulled herself together and confidently stretched her shoulder, and he asked if she could hold off the enemies while he completed the spell. She confirmed this, saying that her family was waiting, and then rushed towards the traitors and quickly struck each one along with Evan. MC meanwhile created icy snow and thought there was only one spell left. He closed his eyes to concentrate and uttered, image. Snow began to gather in one spot, and he remembered what the being in the tower had told him. He only knew individual phrases, but order must be comprehended and applied. A phrase distorts the laws of the universe, and order is the key to these laws. But having lost their great legacy, they had only resorted to absurd abbreviations. As soon as Alon uttered the inevitable fate of the blind man from the snowy mountain, frosty sparks erupted in the sky, and then a huge snowflake appeared before him, creating a spear several times larger. The being laughed, learning that it was called an ice spear. The true name of what these fools had lost was the crystal ice halberd. Seeing what he had done, Raoul immediately rushed to stop him, but Solen stood in his way, shouting, how dare he approach her benefactor? MC, meanwhile, uttered the last part of the phrase, and a huge ice spike rushed forward, freezing everything in its path. Solen parried the traitor's attack. The spike struck the remaining enemies, and then she leaped to the side, and the only one in the path of the ice halberd was Raoul. He failed to react, and the ice spear pierced him. Everyone scattered to avoid the blow, and then his loud cry rang out. A huge ice wall rose on the sandy field, and the frost spread, strewing the area with sharp crystals. The traitors quickly died, impaled on the spikes, and it seemed Raoul too, but he still had strength for one last attack. He broke free from the icy shackles and pounced on Solen, exclaiming that he only needed to kill her. Alon rushed toward her, and he pointed his blade at her, thinking that if he could only take away the right to the essence, he could start over. MC took the blow, protecting her, and she looked in shock at the blade piercing his stomach. When he coughed up blood, Solen turned a furious glare on the traitor, and then kicked him with all her might, finally finishing him off. While Alon was resting, the ice had already melted, and Evan asked him if he was really okay. He confirmed it, thinking he had been mostly unharmed to begin with. The blade only slid across the skin and cut his side, and the hemorrhaging was from mana depletion. The blow was powerful, but he didn't think he'd expend so much energy that he'd suffer internal injuries. When he fought Kalman, he mentioned a man named Shutro, and that their father wanted to harm him. Evan helped him up, and he thought, what did that even mean? Anyway, everything worked out. When he fights an enemy who has absorbed the body of the abyss, it's the same as fighting a god, which means the third limitation applies. That's because the description of this thing said you can become a god by absorbing it. That's why he was able to defeat it. He glanced at Solen, who was standing there with a gloomy look, and thought, Should he start with her? He can't let her turn into sin because of this. She asked why he didn't dodge. He was aiming at her after all. It was because of her that he was wounded. He answered her that she herself had said that she could stop the enemy, and she asked in surprise, did he believe her? To be honest, he asked her for protection because he wouldn't be able to dodge, but it was better for him to remain silent. She worriedly asked why he saved her. It hurt him. He rubbed his neck in confusion and wondered if it was a reflex, because the daughter he had raised for years was on the verge of death. He didn't think the blade would reach him. He answered her that reasons are not needed to save a family, and she noted that family is blood relatives. He realized he had misspoke, and she said with a smile that she still wanted to become a family with him. Her words touched him. It was like an adoptive father who had been unrecognized for years was finally called dad after so many years. But Solen thought about family with him in a different sense. She threw her arms over his shoulder and said that it was impossible to look like this. She was from the Golden Mane tribe, and he was a human, so they could get married. They both stared at her in shock and were speechless. Why was she even doing this in such a place? 5 days passed, and Kalman's atrocities gradually spread throughout Koloni. People were furious at his meanness, and Solen gained so much support that she was awarded the title of the first Baba Yaga. And all this time, she kept up with Alon with her marriage proposal. He didn't answer her and thought that there was no way to skip it, just like a choice in a game. At first, he was even pleased that she wanted to become a family with him, but he replied that she had already proposed to him 19 times. However, he had long considered her his family. She responded that if they got married, they would become a real family. She could make him happy. She was serious. He sighed heavily and thought that sweet potatoes and a quiet aristocratic life were enough to make him happy. It was time to leave. Solen came out to see him off and asked him to be sure to accept her proposal next time. He climbed into the carriage and wondered if she would get tired of this over time. The carriage moved off, and Solen happily waved goodbye. Slightly upset, her guild had become perfect. After the betrayal of the second leader of Ralg, her kin were sincerely angry and worried. Gathering the entire clan does not necessarily mean finding happiness. The ideal family she dreamed of was one that, even in mortal danger, thinks about and trusts each other. She confidently turned to her guild and thought that such a family must be built much more carefully. She must create a personal guard capable of protecting her benefactor at any moment, and then they will become a happy family forever. Meanwhile, Evan told Alon that he had checked everything through the information guild. Besides Ralg's people, no suspicious individuals had been found. He also requested surveillance and regular reports. MC thought that so much effort had been invested. He couldn't allow anything to go wrong. The next step to increase his rank was to deal with the external god, but he only knew about the divine rank. This was definitely not it, which meant there was something else. And with the natural order too, somehow more and more things were appearing that he didn't know about. That being finally advised him to examine the eastern part of the fortress at the foot of the tower. He went there, and there were records of the past that he had never seen before, but could read. The one who values honor above all else. The one who looked too deeply into the secrets of magic. The one who seeks forgotten death. The one with many hands. The one who is full of greed and envy. Alon thought that, just like in the game, the gods were represented figuratively. Hands and greed, they were definitely the 5 great sins. The rest didn't match his knowledge. Psychedelia is a story set in the future, so that's not surprising. But why are the outer gods and the gods written backwards? The outer gods are gods born from human faith or who came from other worlds, and the gods are the 5 great sins that have existed since the beginning of time. However, on the tablet, the 5 great sins are listed as outer gods. That's what confuses him. Evan said he had news about the children as well. Deos defeated the first swordsman, Reinhardt, which surprised MC because his strength, even in the game, was on a completely different level. If he's achieved this in 6 months, how much talent does he have? Evan said Renee has become a member of the Council of Three, which determines Lartania's policies. Alon noted that she had become quite influential, and Evan said that Radon had united 5 archipelagos and become the Pirate King. They said that, like the first Pirate King, he had a bounty on his head, several million. MC was horrified. The Somali pirate had evolved into the Somali Pirate King, and then came the news about Utaya. While they were en route, a Blue Moon meeting was held, at which Solen announced that she would marry the Great Moon. This shocked all 3 of them, as her words amounted to a declaration of war on their boss, Utia. Containing her irritation, she smiled and thought that Solen had always been prone to exaggeration. She said he was a great man, no wonder she liked him. She happily said that she would marry him, and she was sure she would be a great wife for him. Utia closed her eyes, trying to curb her rage, and the others realized she was holding back. Having calmed down, she said with a smile that this was impossible. They were his shadows. She asked puzzledly, but shadows can also marry, can't they? Already on the verge of rage, Utia said that as his shadows, they cannot stand next to him. She understands this, right? Solen was upset and said that she didn't care. The most important thing is what the Great Moon himself thinks. Utia grinned and asked, does she think he will choose her? She answered that, in fact, he told her that she was not bad. When she asked if he really hated her, he told her that he didn't, so she completely distorted the meaning of the words. Hearing this, Utia became indignant and Deos asked what had happened there. When she told them everything in detail, he said that it reminded him of his greatness, which he had seen 6 months ago. His calm, as if he had walked the road to the underworld more than once or twice. She agreed with him and asked if he had experienced something similar. He confirmed this, and, tormenting himself for his poor faith, exclaimed that he had failed to appreciate his strength and even doubted him, having sensed the magical power of the enemy, and he had consoled even him, who had fallen into doubt. He was the most worthy of men, and he had made a decision. He must become stronger in order to take revenge on the black creatures and become their sword. Solen joyfully clapped her hands and said that she understood him perfectly. 2 hours passed. Dace continued to discuss the great moon, and then suddenly Uchiha said discontentedly that in any case she could not marry him. She, on the contrary, exclaimed that she could marry him, and then they began to argue. Radon did not want to listen to all this at all, and Renee collected notes. Now it is forbidden to ask Dace about anything concerning the Great Moon. Secondly, as for Uchiha, when it comes to the Great Moon, she begins to behave like a child. This is something new. When the meeting finally ended, Radon breathed a sigh of relief. He didn't want to know any of this. Sometime later, in the outskirts of the capital of the Kingdom of Asteria, a secret meeting took place between the head of the aristocratic faction, Marquise Filboid, and the head of the royalist faction, Duke Rimgrave. The Duke proposed an alliance to destroy the Kalpa faction, the one full of madmen. The Marquis said that the existence of this faction worries both sides, so he agrees. Does he have a plan? He replied that they could involve the Holy Kingdom of Rosario and use the letter of Reformation. The Holy Kingdom of Rosario, being the center of faith, can send this letter to any state if it suspects someone of heresy. The support of several cardinals is required for sending, which gives the letter enormous power. The Marquis remarked that this would be a perfect excuse. And what were his demands? The Duke said he had heard that the consent of at least 2 cardinals was required, so he was asking for half the bribe. The Marquis said that then he would have to reciprocate, and he informed him that he had already completed negotiations with these cardinals, so it wouldn't take long. They decided to leave the rest and raise their goblets in honor of their alliance. Sometime later, Cardinal Sergio, with whom he had made an appointment, met with another cardinal. Hearing footsteps in the empty worship hall, he turned around and said that although there were 8 of them under the command of the saint and the pope, they were quite busy, so this was their second meeting. Nevertheless, he was glad to meet her. Uchiha reciprocated, and he decided to get straight to the point. He would like her to lend her name to a letter about the Reformation to Count Palladio. He did not think this was an unfavorable offer for her, and she should not worry. He would easily find a reason to accuse her of heresy. After all, he was just that kind. So what would she say to that? Uchiha smirked and asked, do they need her name to ruin Count Alon Palladio? Sergio said that in this matter they would focus on the suspicious death of Cardinal Viantra. He was sure that, given her position, she understood everything. He grinned and thought that this way he could take the bribe for himself, and the gates of heaven would open before him. But suddenly his entire body was pierced by terrible pain, his limbs bent unnaturally, because of which he immediately fell, and Uchiha asked in a rage, was he asking her to kill the one she worshipped? His loud scream rang out throughout the hall, but no one heard it. She said that he could scream as much as he wanted, but no one would come. She continued to torture him, and he began to beg her to just kill him, to which she replied that she had already said more than 10 times that she couldn't. His body was pierced by pain again. He asked her to stop, but she continued to heal him and break his bones again. He fell on his knees before her and began to beg her to stop, let her kill him instead. She said that she would not kill him. He had something to do for her. However, he had attempted to take it and must be punished for it. He was again struck by pain. He screamed hysterically, and she ordered him to acknowledge his sins in order to gain forgiveness. A month had passed since returning from the desert, and MC began preparing to leave again, this time for a magic conference. Evan informed him that all the preparations were almost complete, and he thought that he was the leader, so it seemed he would have to go, although he still needed to deal with the entities of the abyss and the outer gods. How he didn't want to go there. That's what he would usually think. But something joyful had happened in his life. He took out the letter, and Evan asked if he still carried it with him. It had arrived 2 weeks ago. He replied that he looked at it, and his soul was immediately at peace. It was a certificate confirming his position as the head of the faction, and an official salary. The amount turned out to be much more than he could have expected. Before this, he constantly wondered why anyone would cling to a position full of hardships. Afterwards, money opened his eyes, and he realized that with great power comes great responsibility. He has no idea how the faction works, what brings in so much money, but considering the finances of his county, this is excellent news. The true panacea for a modern man is money. His poor, wounded soul is slowly healing. Isn't this the true magical nature of capitalism? After some time, he arrived at the estate of the Marquis of Biljutin. He walked into the banquet hall and thought that he had heard that many famous people were coming to the conference, but he didn't expect such a variety here. There are warriors, merchants, even priests. He was greeted by two women, Kalia and Loria. They immediately inquired about his health, and he was forced to start a conversation with them. He contacted two crime bosses, but this misunderstanding made him a little nervous. If they greeted him, then they should leave. Luckily, Evan arrived with amazing news. He quietly told him that he had heard that the leader of the royalist faction had received a letter calling for reformation and had been taken to the Holy Kingdom. Alon said that was good. That meant he wouldn't cross paths with him. He went to get another cake, and a man approached them, and Kalia asked if she could help him with anything. He ignored the women and walked up to Alon, fearfully saying that he had lost. Let him spare him. He bowed his head before him, and the nobles were greatly surprised by his gesture. The man at the top of the political world, the head of the aristocratic faction, Marquis Filboid, bowed his head. Unlike the shadow world, the political world is based on reasons and justifications. Bowing your head to another is the same as giving them your power. Kalia smiled nervously and thought that she already knew it. He was incredible. Even now he was calm, as if he had foreseen all this from the very beginning. A few days ago, the Marquis received a magical sphere and a mysterious letter. It looked rather ominous, similar to a letter about the Reformation. The vision contained in the magical sphere lasted only 5 seconds, but it managed to terrify him. Duke Rimgrave screamed, asking him to read the letter and come to the Holy Kingdom to behold the sacred moon. They were mistaken. After finishing the playback, the sphere cracked, and in the letter, the Marquis found a threat. He would be next. His hands trembled, and he wondered how this had happened. They only wanted to destroy him politically. Anyone who received the letter about the Reformation would fall in the political world. But if they were not connected with the heretics, their life was in no danger. However, Duke Rimgrave, who had no connections with the heretics, was hit. The Marquis immediately realized that Palatio had orchestrated the whole thing. But how did he manage to stage it better than them? But something was more important than that. He would be next. At the moment, he fell to his knees before Alon and bowed his head, touching his forehead to the floor, and said that he wanted to live the rest of his life in peace. He would retire from politics, if only he could spare him the letter about the Reformation. MC was completely confused, and did not understand what was happening, and looked at the women, thinking that it was their doing. Meanwhile, they thought with smiles that the face of one of the 3 secret rulers of Asteria was now increasingly revealed to them. This was magnificent, as expected of the Count. So the rumors that Altia and Genonia nominated Palateo as deputy head for convenience were finally dispelled. On the 3rd day after the meeting began, Alon went east for the magical conclave. While he and Evan were walking down the street, he said that Marquis Filboid, they say, also received the letter and went to the Holy Kingdom. MC asked, so he was dragged there after all? His knight asked in bewilderment, wasn't it he who sent it to him? He asked in response, how could he send him a letter about reformation? Evan was confused. He said it himself. MC told the Marquis that he would think about it, but he never thought it would sound like that. He just wanted to get out of that situation as soon as possible. Meanwhile, in the labyrinthine city of Lartania, a city of endless exploration, at the top of which stand 5 great guilds. One of the 5 great guilds, Blood Iron, was currently descending into the labyrinth. One of the guild members asked admiringly, did he really kill 1,000 creatures single-handedly? The man called him a newbie and said that the guild leaders were practically equal to superhumans. The guild leader, Alderic, turned to him and told him not to exaggerate. Nothing like that would happen this time. The girl asked, do they need to capture 1 monster from the 20th floor alive? That was the order, right? Alderic said the advance was too generous, so he agreed. Levels in multiples of 5 are safe, which is odd. He figured that even if it was a trap, for him, having explored level 50, it was nothing, and he said that in case of failure, the advance didn't need to be returned, so everything would be fine. They descended to the 20th floor. The girl looked around and, pointing at an unusual goblin, noted that the boss really did have a nose for prey. One of the guild members chuckled and exclaimed that it was a goblin, and the most pitiful of all monsters. They would get the same amount of money on top for it. It was a real golden goblin. And what kind of clothes is he wearing? Is that Oriental style or something? The goblin sighed in irritation and turned to them, noting that the annoying gnats had made a lot of noise. He waved his hand, and everyone who rushed at him immediately suffered an unenviable fate. Seeing this, Alderic immediately drew his axe and charged. He quickly covered the vast distance between them and pounced on him in a leap, but he suffered the same fate as his comrades. This goblin was the king of hungry ghosts, and filled with pride and disdain, he began his journey to the surface. Meanwhile, Alan arrived at the central tower. Evan had to raise his head to look at the building in its entirety, and he noticed that the tower was indeed very tall. Lion, accompanied by other red mages, approached them and greeted him, saying that they had not seen each other for a long time. Let him come inside. Along the way, she told him that the main events of the academy would begin tomorrow, so today, he was free to look around. He asked where the library was, and she offered to take him there. MC had to come here without his knight, as he wasn't allowed into the main building, and went to the break room with the other mages. Lion said that tomorrow, the first day of the convention, A presentation on the new Green Tower theory and a friendly duel were planned. She was interrupted by the loud, disgruntled voice of a mage arguing with someone. Lion sighed heavily and said that it seemed they had gotten into another fight with the deputy head of the Blue Tower. Alon asked her to tell him about it, and she said that she was incredibly narcissistic. Phinia, meanwhile, mockingly told the Green Mage that even if 25th rank mages like him appeared, he still wouldn't stand a chance against her. He grabbed his head and shouted in rage that someday he would make that insolent woman apologize, and Phinia came out into the hallway. Seeing Lion, she mockingly asked, "Who is this?" It was the mage she ground to dust last year, and this time she even brought a friend to yap at her with her. Since MC had his back to her, she didn't immediately realize who he was, but when he turned around, her demeanor immediately changed, and she bowed to him, excitedly greeting him. He noted that they hadn't seen each other for 6 months. How had she been doing all this time? She nervously told him that she was fine, and he said that she didn't need to be so uptight with him. She nervously looked away and asked if he wanted her to communicate with him informally. He told her that she could communicate with him however she felt most comfortable, and she thanked him for his leniency. The Green Mages couldn't believe their eyes, thinking it was an illusion, but it didn't dissipate. Phinia, who had just been barking at everyone, suddenly became docile. Alon said that it was none of his business. But isn't it better for mages to live in harmony? Understanding what he wanted from her, she immediately ran up to the Green Mages and bowed to them, asking for their forgiveness, and offered to be friends with them from now on. MC said goodbye to her, and she, saluting him, used a special spell of instant escape, a jump from the window. He thought with puzzlement that with each meeting her condition was getting worse. He wondered what she imagined there. He saw the dumbfounded looks of the Green Mages on himself and wondered if he had done something wrong. They continued on their way to the library, and Lion said that this crazy Phinia was behaving like this in front of him. It was simply amazing. He asked, "So that's her nickname?" He knew she was an arrogant genius, but to such an extent, they approached the elevator, and the purple mages came out. One of them, seeing Lion, immediately smiled and asked if she had come to admire him. She told him that it wasn't so, and he asked who was next to her. His face was unfamiliar. She told him it was Count Palladio. He shouldn't be rude and leave. The mage looked at him carefully and asked, "So is he that celebrity?" He was pleased to meet him. His name was Baruch. He was the mage of the Purple Tower and the son of its leader. Alon nodded and thought that he was seeing him for the first time. Baruch finally told the girl that she would soon become sympathetic to him, and then left. Lion turned to the Count and told him not to even talk to him. He was already a 4th circle mage, but his only known trait was stealing other people's research and deliberately disgracing people. He watched him go and thought that at his age, the 4th circle was already the category of genius. Power levels make a huge difference. With each time the gap widens, and the difference in power between the 7th and 8th circles is simply unimaginable. She said the library he was looking for was on the 38th floor, and they would see each other at the academy presentation. He thanked her for her help and entered the elevator, ascended to the 38th floor, and looked around with delight. In person, of course, it was a completely different experience. He had 2 tasks here. First, he needed to reset all the broken clock hands to 12 o'clock, and second, he needed to find a black book with no title or author. This book contained a special page leading to a secret space, from which he retrieved the Ring of Radiance. The day after the Green Tower's performance at the friendly arena, Baruch challenged him to a duel, something he certainly didn't expect.